I never thought the smell of coffee could make my stomach twist, but now, even a warm cup in someone else's hand puts a tremor in my spine. That morning in my kitchen at Fort Campbell, the scent hit me first sharp and bitter, drifting from the pot I had brewed an hour earlier. I was still in my PT gear hair pulled back, starting a quiet Sunday the same way I always did before a long duty week. I had no idea that in less than 5 minutes my life would split into a before and an after. I heard the front door open without knocking, a sound that should never echo through a soldier's house, especially not base housing where access is restricted. But rules never meant anything to Brianna. She stepped inside like she owned the place, her heels clicking against the tile, the scent of heavy perfume sweeping in behind her. Her eyes were bright, fixed on me with the same sharpness she used whenever she was about to push for something she knew I would refuse. "Where's Ethan?" That was all she asked. No greeting, no explanation. Just a sharp demand echoing in the small kitchen. "He's not here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And you can't just walk into my house like this." Her jaw tightened. "Mom needs the paperwork today. You know that. She said you're stalling. She said you're trying to embarrass us." I was already exhausted with the conversation, and it had not even started. I knew exactly what paperwork she meant. The VA loan cosign request, the one I had said no to at least 10 different ways because it was illegal, irresponsible, and more importantly, not my responsibility. I told her again, "Brianna, I am not signing for your mother's loan. It is not my loan to sign, and it is definitely not allowed." She stepped closer, the corner of her mouth lifting into something between a smirk and a threat. "You have steady pay. You have benefits. You don't have kids. You owe the family." I felt something inside me crack a little, that quiet breaking sound people talk about when they realize someone never saw them as a person, only a resource. I said no. That was it. One word. One refusal. And everything in her face changed. Her eyes sharpened, her shoulders tensed, her breath came faster. She looked around the kitchen, searching for something, and the moment she spotted the coffee pot still half full on the counter, I felt my heartbeat stutter. "Brianna, don't!" She grabbed it before I could move. The lid clattered. Steam rose from the spout. I stepped back instinctively, but she was already crossing the space between us. "You're selfish. You're ungrateful. You think you're better than us because you wear that uniform." The pot tilted. Time slowed so much that I could hear my own pulse in my ears. Then the world snapped forward. Heat exploded across my face and neck. I gasped from the shock, instinctively reaching for my skin, not even sure where the burn hurt most. The coffee wasn't boiling anymore, but it was hot enough to ignite a sting so sharp it felt like fire racing along my jawline and collarbone. I stumbled backward into the counter, trying to catch my breath, seeing spots dance in the air. My vision blurred as Brianna stood there gripping the pot with shaking hands. The look she gave me was not regret. It was defiance. Behind her, I heard a small scream. Her daughter stood in the doorway, eyes wide, hands over her mouth, trembling. "Mommy, stop!" Aunt Madison didn't do anything. For a second, everything froze. Then another voice. Ethan's. He stood behind his sister hair, messy shirt half-buttoned like he had just rolled out of bed. He didn't run to me, didn't ask what happened, didn't look concerned. He just crossed his arms and muttered, "You should have just helped them." Something inside me went quiet. A silence deeper than shock. A silence made of truth. I realized then that there was no world where I was safe in this family. I pressed my palm against my neck as the burn throbbed, trying to steady my breathing. My skin felt tight and raw, not blistered, but deeply angry and pulsing with heat. Brianna finally dropped the pot onto the counter, the sound sharp enough to make her daughter jump. She whispered something like, "You deserved it," then stormed toward the door. I barely heard her. I was watching her daughter clutch her small hands, tears streaking down her cheeks. That was the moment that mattered. Not the pain, not the betrayal, not even Ethan's cold stare. It was the look on that child's face, a look that understood something terrible had just become normal. I knew then this could never happen again. I knew I could never let her grow up thinking this was acceptable. 4 months later, in a crowded Nashville courtroom, that same woman who had thrown hot coffee at me would sink to her knees, tears running down her face, begging me for mercy she had never shown. But by then, the truth was out in the open, and it was far too late to take it back. I grew up in Clarksville, Tennessee, a place where the summers felt endless and the sound of cicadas could swallow an entire evening. My earliest memories were simple ones, the kind that stay warm in the back of your mind long after life has taken sharper turns. I remember my father's laugh, a deep, warm sound that filled every corner of our small house. He worked long hours at the post office, but somehow still had time to teach me how to ride a bike, how to fish in the Cumberland River, and how to tie the perfect knot on my shoelaces so they would never come loose on the playground. Then, when I was 9, he got sick. I did not understand all the medical terms adults whispered around me, but I knew something was wrong when his laugh became faint and his face looked thinner each week. One cold February morning, he was gone, and even though people said the pain would fade, I learned later that some losses never fully settle. My mother tried to rebuild our lives the best she could. She was practical and steady, the kind of woman who handled grief by organizing bills and keeping the house spotless. About 2 years later, she remarried. I remember standing in the backyard the day she told me the sun hitting the fence in long stripes, thinking that I should feel something bigger than confusion. His name was Michael Wolfe, a man from Nashville who spoke loudly and acted like every room belonged to him the moment he walked in. Along with him came his daughter Brianna, who was 11 when we met. That was the moment my childhood split into a before and after. Not because she was cruel at first, but because she stepped into our house like someone who believed she deserved every good thing in it. I was quiet and observant, still figuring out where my place was in this newly stitched family. Brianna, on the other hand, had no doubts about her place. She ran the hallways, climbed on the furniture, and always demanded the last slice of anything. Teachers described me as focused and responsible. They described her as enthusiastic and headstrong, which sounded polite on paper, but everyone at school knew it meant she expected the world to bend to her mood. While I spent afternoons doing homework or helping around the house, she threw tantrums when things didn't go her way. My mother, overwhelmed and maybe wanting peace more than fairness, often gave in. That pattern grew deeper every year. By the time I was 16, I knew I wanted to leave home as soon as possible. Not because I hated anyone, but because I wanted a life where effort mattered more than demands. The Army had always been in the back of my mind. My father had spoken about service with quiet respect, and something about structure and discipline called to me. I liked the idea of working for something that could not be taken away by someone's mood or opinion. When I turned 20, I walked into the recruiting office just off Fort Campbell Boulevard. The sergeant behind the desk asked me what drew me there, and I remember answering with a kind of calm certainty I had never felt before. I told him I wanted to be part of something that required strength, not noise, something that rewarded consistency, something that would never mistake selfishness for confidence. I chose military police because it blended structure with responsibility. I knew it would challenge me. That was exactly the point. Training at Fort Leonard Wood was the hardest thing I had ever done, but in a strange way, it felt like home. The long marches, the early mornings, the constant drills, the never-ending pressure to think clearly under stress, all of it stripped away the unnecessary parts of me and left behind something stronger. I learned how to push through discomfort without letting it define me. I learned how to enforce rules with calm authority. I learned how to stay steady even when people tried to provoke a reaction. Those lessons would matter far more than I realized at the time. While other trainees struggled with the rigidity of the system, I found a sense of peace in it. There were expectations, and if you met them, you advanced. Simple, fair, predictable, far different from a childhood where favoritism determined everything. I made it through the academy and received my orders to Fort Campbell, returning to the place where my life had begun, but now as a different version of myself. More disciplined, more grounded, more aware of what I could endure. My mother was proud, though. Brianna reacted with her typical shrug, saying something like, "You always liked rules too much anyway." I did not mind. I was no longer looking for her approval. In those years, I grew into the kind of person people trusted. Steady, hard-working, quiet, but not weak. the kind of soldier who would take the toughest shifts without complaining, the kind of woman who did not ask for help easily but would show up for anyone who needed her. I built my life on routines, morning runs, clean barracks, clear reports, a calm mindset. I believed that if I lived with enough discipline, chaos would never have the power to swallow me again. I had no idea then that the real tests waiting for me would not come from deployments or patrols or chain of command. They would come from the people I thought were family people who mistook my steadiness for softness and my loyalty for something they had the right to exploit. That was who I was before everything fell apart. A soldier shaped by hardship, strengthened by discipline, and still naive enough to think that effort could fix people who did not want to change. My first years in the military police were a blur of rotations duty rosters and packing my life into green duffel bags every time my PCS orders dropped. I served at Fort Campbell, then spent a year at Fort Drum, then returned to Campbell again for another assignment. Each move carved a little more steel into me. The Army had a way of stripping away any softness left over from childhood and replacing it with muscle memory reflexes and the constant expectation that I had to be ready for anything. I did patrols in sleet and heat that felt like it was melting the asphalt under my boots and in neighborhoods around base where the sound of shouting could turn into a domestic call within seconds. I learned how to defuse tension without raising my voice. I learned how to read a room the moment I stepped into it. I learned how to stand firm even when someone twice my size was trying to intimidate me. And I learned most of all that strength did not have to be loud. It could be steady and quiet and controlled like a tight grip on a radio or a clear command spoken at the right moment. By the time I was 27, I had settled into a rhythm I trusted. My life was built on predictable routines and carefully controlled decisions. But life has a strange way of unraveling the moment you believe you finally have it under control. I met Ethan Wolfe during my second assignment at Fort Campbell. He worked part-time at an auto shop just off Tinytown Road and part-time as a driver for a local company. He had that southern charm that landed softly at first slow drawl, a warm laugh, the kind of smile that made it seem like he genuinely listened. After years in a job that required reading people at their worst, it felt disarming to meet someone who appeared easygoing. He was kind to me in a way that felt simple, predictable, at least in the beginning. We dated for 9 months before getting married, mostly because I thought stability was something you built, not something you examined first. Ethan seemed steady, and after years of hard service, I let myself believe that maybe being with someone gentle might soften the parts of me that had grown too sharp. But charm has a way of masking weakness. It did not take long for me to realize that Ethan relied on me more than he relied on himself. He bounced from job to job, always promising the next one would be better. Bills somehow became my responsibility. Decisions that should have been shared landed on my shoulders while he shrugged and said that since I made more money, it made sense for me to handle things. His mother, Darlene, entered my life shortly after our wedding. She was a woman with a sharp voice and sharper expectations, someone who believed the world owed her comfort because life had once been unkind to her. She called often, usually to request something. Money for a car repair, help paying a bill, a loan for new appliances. It always came wrapped in the same phrase. Family helps family. At first, I tried to be understanding. Military families are built on support and sacrifice. I had no problem helping when I thought it was truly needed, but Darlene's requests were not emergencies. They were habits, and habits grew deeper with every dollar handed over. Then came the visits. She would show up unannounced at our place on base housing, claiming she was in the area, always needing something, always staying longer than she should. Ethan would reassure me with forced smiles. She is harmless. She just gets lonely. But it was not harmless when loneliness demanded money we did not have. It was not harmless when she hinted that my pay as an MP meant I should shoulder more responsibility. I had always known Brianna would show up again somewhere in my life. She and I had never been close, but now she re-entered my world through Ethan. Her father had married my mother, and somehow between those tangled lines of past marriages, she and Ethan had remained close. She visited often, far too often, mostly to gossip, criticize, or complain about money she felt the world owed her. That was when the first red flags appeared. Brianna started small. She borrowed $20 here, $50 there. Then she asked for bigger things. A bill payment, help with rent. She always used the same tired phrase her father once used when we were teenagers: family helps family. At first, I believed it. Then I realized family for people like Brianna meant one direction only. Every time I said no, she pouted, argued, or twisted the story until I was the villain depriving her of what she felt she deserved. I reminded myself that small red flags do not always mean disaster, but they do mean something is wrong. And there were so many small ones. Ethan brushed off every concern I raised, always siding with his sister or his mother, insisting I was misunderstanding their intentions. "You take everything too seriously, Madison. They are trying their best." I wanted to believe him because believing him meant believing my marriage could work. But my instincts, honed by years in the MP, whispered another truth. People reveal who they are not in their loud moments, but in their small, selfish ones. And the Wolf family had a long list of those. I kept pushing forward, telling myself that stability could still be built if I just stayed patient, stayed disciplined, stayed steady. But in the shadows of those early years with Ethan and his family, something darker was beginning to take shape. A pattern that would soon grow so bold it could no longer be ignored. In the early years of my service, I learned quickly that being a military police soldier meant living inside a balance beam that never stopped shaking. Every shift, every call, every interaction required precision. I handled everything from traffic stops outside Gate 4 to late-night domestic disputes in on-post housing where neighbors whispered through blinds and couples pretended everything was fine until you stepped inside and saw the truth. I learned to scan a room in seconds, looking for the unstable variable, the raised voice, the clenched hand, the quiet child staring from behind a doorway. Domestic calls were the hardest. You never forgot the look of someone who desperately needed help but was too scared to ask. We were trained to stay calm, stay procedural, stay professional, even when someone screamed inches from our face. Chain of command mattered. Discipline mattered. You were expected to follow protocol even when emotions in the room were spiraling out of control. Being a woman in military police meant the beam shook a little harder. Some soldiers listened to me only because my rank required it. Others questioned my decisions even when I had more experience. A few tried to test me raising their voices or pushing boundaries to see whether I would flinch. I never did. Not once. I earned my reputation the same way every good MP does, through long nights, clear reports, and handling the toughest calls without hesitation. But doing your job well does not protect you from resentment. The better I performed, the more a few of the men in my unit bristled. They whispered that I was too strict or too calm or too serious. Some said I was trying too hard. Others suggested I was being favored. When I pinned Staff Sergeant early, the looks lasted for weeks. People talk about service like it is a single mission, but the real mission is learning how to carry yourself with authority, even when others want to knock you off balance. I kept my focus where it belonged. Duty, standards, readiness. Those were the things I trusted. Those were the things I could control. What I could not control was the way the Wolf family began to creep into the corners of my career. It started with small comments from Ethan. "You make more than me. You have benefits I do not have. You have job security." I thought at first he was proud, maybe even relieved, but the tone changed after a while. What used to sound like admiration turned into expectation. "You can cover that. You should handle it. It makes sense because you are the stable one." Then Brianna's voice joined the chorus. She never missed a chance to remind me that my military pay came from taxpayers and therefore should be shared with family. She said it while sitting in my kitchen eating food I bought. She said it while asking for money she never intended to repay. She said it whenever she wanted something she did not earn. "You have steady pay. You have benefits. You do not even have kids. You should help family." The way she used the word family always felt heavy, like she was setting a trap I could not see yet. At the time, it was just annoying another selfish request in a long list of selfish requests. But selfishness grows loud when you feed it. Ethan began leaning on me more. At first, it was the small things, asking me to cover a bill because he was between jobs again or because his hours had been cut. I understood temporary problems and I did not mind helping, but temporary kept stretching. His shifts never stabilized, his effort never increased. He stopped pretending he was trying to get ahead, and every time I tried to bring it up, he brushed it off with the same lazy reassurance. Do not worry, Maddie. We are a team. But being a team meant I was carrying all the weight while he watched from the sidelines, saying he would jump in as soon as the right opportunity appeared. That opportunity never came. Off duty, the stress built up in ways I did not recognize at first. On patrol, I could handle anything. Chaos made sense. Conflict had rules. But at home, boundaries blurred. Ethan let his mother criticize me without defending me. He let Brianna show up unannounced and demand things that were not hers to demand. Every time I tried to enforce a boundary, he acted like I was creating problems. It is easier if you just let it go, he said, as if letting things go was supposed to be my job. Slowly, almost quietly, I became the dependable one, not just at work, but at home. The person who fixed things, the person who paid things, the person who kept everything together. And the more I held up, the more they leaned. People say pressure builds character, but the truth is that pressure reveals everyone else's character too. The military made me strong. It made me disciplined. It taught me to carry weight without complaint. But it also made me a target for people who saw strength not as something earned, but as something they could drain dry. I did not see the full picture yet, but the signs were already there. The way Ethan shrugged off responsibilities, the way his mother treated my paycheck as community property, the way Brianna used guilt like a weapon she knew exactly how to swing. These were the early cracks in the wall. At the time, they seemed like annoyances or minor insults, but they were warning signs. Small tremors before the earthquake. I just did not know yet how much damage that earthquake would cause. The first real sign of trouble arrived on a quiet Thursday evening, the kind of night where nothing dramatic should happen. I had just come off a 12-hour shift and was still in my uniform boots, unlaced hair, tucked back under a cap I had not bothered removing yet. I was exhausted in the way only MPs understand. The kind of exhaustion that settles behind your ribs and refuses to move. Ethan was sitting at the kitchen table with his phone in hand, looking nervous in a way that immediately made my stomach tighten. Ethan only looked nervous when he wanted something, or when he was about to repeat something his family told him to say. He cleared his throat the moment I walked in. So, Brianna called. Mom needs help. I felt the first wave of dread wash over me. I learned long ago that when the Wolf family used the word help, what they really meant was money. How much this time, I asked, already bracing. Ethan shook his head. It is not about cash. It is a bigger opportunity. Brianna said you can help Mom get approved for something she really needs. My shoulders tensed. What exactly? He smiled like he was easing into good news. She wants to apply for a VA home loan, but she needs someone with qualifying service to co-sign, and since you are the only one with military service in the family, Brianna said, you should do it because family helps family. I stared at him for a long second, waiting for the part where he would tell me this was a joke. He never did. Ethan, you know that is not how VA loans work. He shrugged. Brianna said you could make it work. She said as long as you sign the paperwork and let her mom use your benefits to secure the loan, it is fine. She said you get a ton of perks from the military and the least you can do is share. The least I can do. The phrase hit me like a quiet slap. I sat down across from him, the fluorescent kitchen light humming above us. First of all, it is illegal. I am the veteran. The loan is tied to my service, my occupancy, my benefits. No one except me or my spouse can use it. Not my in-laws, not extended family, not friends, not anyone. He looked irritated as if I were making excuses. Brianna said you are being dramatic. She said plenty of people bend the rules a little. She said if you really loved the family, you would not make everything so complicated. There it was. The pressure, the guilt, the emotional thumb pressing harder and harder on the same bruise. I kept my voice steady. I am not bending federal law because your mother wants a cheaper mortgage. It is not happening. Ethan's jaw tightened. He leaned back in the chair, crossing his arms. So that is it. You are just refusing. You are not even willing to talk about it. I laughed, a short, humorless sound. Talk about what, Ethan? It is a federal lending program, not a Christmas wish list. I could feel the MP training in my bloodstream that same calm clarity I used on volatile domestic calls. It helped me keep my tone level even though my pulse had begun to spike. He pushed his chair back with more force than necessary. You never want to help. You never want to support anyone. You think you are better than the rest of us because you wear a uniform. I knew where this was going. He was leading me into the same trap every manipulative argument eventually used. If I held a boundary, I was selfish. If I followed the law, I was cold. If I protected myself, I was cruel. Before I could respond, the front door opened without knocking. Again. Brianna stepped inside with the confidence of someone who believed all spaces belonged to her. She looked straight at me. So you said no. I folded my hands. Yes. She scoffed loudly. You have got to be kidding. Mom practically raised you. You owe us. That sentence stunned me more than the request itself. Raised me, I asked. Her eyes narrowed. She was there when you needed stability. She fed you. She supported you. You would not even be where you are without her. My mother raised me, not Darlene. Brianna rolled her eyes dramatically. You always twist things. You always act like you made it on your own. You think wearing that uniform gives you some special status above the rest of us. I could feel the familiar tension rising in my chest, the kind that comes from being accused of things you never did. But I stayed calm. Brianna, you are asking me to commit loan fraud. She waved her hand dismissively. Nobody cares about that stuff. Just sign the papers and stop being difficult. When I did not immediately agree, she leaned forward, voice low and sharp. I swear, Madison, you are so ungrateful. After everything this family has done for you, you spit in our faces. Ethan nodded beside her. Yeah, Maddie. Why make things harder than they need to be? It was so casual, so rehearsed, so confidently wrong. That was the moment the first real crack formed in my marriage. Not because of the loan request, but because of what came after. The gaslighting, the rewritten history, the sudden insistence that my refusal to break the law meant I was the problem. Brianna kept talking, her voice rising. You act like everything is about you. You act like helping Mom is some huge burden. You wear that uniform like it makes you superior. It was shocking how fast her frustration turned into cruelty. How quickly Ethan shifted into agreement. How eagerly both of them twisted my boundaries into insults. For the first time, I saw the truth. They were not asking for help. They were demanding obedience. Blind, unquestioning, unconditional obedience. That was the first red flag. Not the loan, not the pressure, but the way they looked at me as if my life, my service, my stability, my future belonged to them. And the worst part was knowing deep down that this was only the beginning. I used to think base housing was the one place in my life where I could breathe. It was supposed to be orderly, quiet, controlled. A space where only authorized people could enter, where rules actually meant something. But Brianna treated rules the same way she treated boundaries, like suggestions meant for other people. It started happening more often after the VA loan argument. I would come home from a shift expecting the usual calm, only to find her car parked crooked across my driveway, her silhouette already inside my kitchen window. She never called, never asked, never waited. She acted like my home was an extension of hers, a place she had inherited simply by being related through marriage. One Saturday morning, I returned from PT training. I walked into the living room, still wearing my Army PT shirt, hair damp with sweat, and froze as soon as I saw her. Brianna was sitting on the floor, surrounded by my folders, my mail, my financial records, even my leave and earnings statements from my pay. Papers were spread across the rug as if she were conducting an audit she was never invited to perform. What are you doing? I asked, my voice sharp enough that she finally looked up. She did not look guilty, not even surprised. I am trying to help you get organized. You have things everywhere. You do not even know what you have. My documents were always in perfect order, color-coded, labeled, stored where only I accessed them. MPs are trained to keep everything precise because sloppy paperwork can destroy an entire case. She knew that. She also knew exactly how invasive this was. I stepped closer, stomach tightening. You cannot just come in here and go through my files. She lifted a stack of papers like a trophy. Relax. I was just looking at your pay stubs. Mom said your income is higher than we thought. It will make the loan easier. I felt the heat rise in my chest. I told you I am not signing anything. Brianna shrugged and kept flipping through my documents like she owned them. She found my re-enlistment papers next and whistled under her breath. Wow, you are locked in until, 2026? You are basically guaranteed money for the next few years. No wonder Mom is stressed. She said you are being selfish. I reached down and snatched the papers out of her hand before I could think. Her eyes widened, but only for a second before settling into a look of irritation. I knew that look. It meant she was about to escalate. She stood up. I need your MyPay password. It was so casual I thought I misheard. What? She rolled her eyes like I was the unreasonable one. You heard me. I need to calculate your debt-to-income ratio so Mom can start the application. Just write it down. I actually laughed. A short, incredulous sound that barely hid the anger pulsing in my jaw. Brianna MyPay controls all my financial info. My tax statements, my LES, my bank accounts, my allotments, my entire identity. Even Ethan does not have that password. She snorted. Ethan does not need it. He said you handle everything. You should be handling this too. I stared at her stunned at the confidence it took to demand access to a federal financial portal like it was a grocery list. No, absolutely not. She flung a hand in the air. You are unbelievable. You walk around acting like you earned everything you have when the only reason you are successful is because you do not have a family to support. That hit harder than it should have. Her tone, the assumption, the entitlement, and the way she twisted my independence into a flaw. Before I could respond, Ethan walked through the front door holding a fast food bag. He took one look at the scene and sighed loudly like I was the one causing chaos. What now, Madison? I gestured to the mess on the floor. She broke into the house. She went through my files. She demanded my MyPay password. Ethan dropped the food on the counter and rubbed his forehead as if this was all exhausting for him. Babe, she is trying to help. You always overreact. Overreact. She went through my official documents. My personal records. Ethan stepped between us with the same dismissive calm he used whenever he wanted to avoid responsibility. Maddie, she is family. She is trying to make sure Mom gets what she needs. It would not kill you to cooperate. My pulse thudded in my ears. Cooperate. The word repeated itself like an order I had not agreed to follow. I picked up my folders one by one, fighting the urge to shake. My hands were steady, my breathing controlled. But something inside me twisted sharply. Something I recognized from my years on patrol. The moment when a situation goes from inconvenient to unsafe. Brianna leaned against the wall, smiling like she had won a small battle. You know, Maddie, I used to think you were uptight. But now I think you are just selfish. You have all this money, all these benefits, all this stability, and you cannot even help the people who took you in. I froze again. Took me in? Ethan nodded instantly. Yeah, Maddie. Mom said she practically raised you. That was when something in me finally shifted. I felt it like a cold click inside my chest. A line being drawn. A truth becoming undeniable. They were rewriting my life to justify using me. They were twisting my history to claim ownership over my future. And they were doing it with complete confidence because they believed I would never push back. That night after they left and the house went quiet again, I sat at the table and opened a new folder on my phone. I labeled it Documentation. I did not know exactly what I would need it for yet. I only knew one thing. People who invade your home do not stop at your files. They eventually come for your stability, your dignity, your life, and you have to be ready when they do. The shift from annoying to dangerous didn't happen in one dramatic explosion. It crept in slowly the way a house starts making new noises before the foundation finally cracks. After Brianna's intrusion into my base housing, things quieted down for a few weeks, almost as if the Wolf family was regrouping. But people like them never stop. They just wait for the next angle. And the next angle came from Darlene. It always did. She called one afternoon while I was reviewing patrol logs in the duty office. I shouldn't have answered, but Ethan texted twice saying Mom needs you, and I made the mistake of giving him the benefit of the doubt. The moment I picked up, Darlene didn't say hello. She didn't even pretend. I need help with the mortgage this month. My stomach tightened. What do you mean, help? She sighed dramatically, the way people sigh when they're already convinced you've failed them. I need you to send me half your BAH. I thought I misheard. Half my basic allowance for housing. The money specifically allotted for soldiers to cover living expenses. Money that the military trusted me to manage responsibly. Money tied to my service, not hers. Darlene, I can't give you my bag. That's for my household. She scoffed the sound sharp enough to slice through the phone. You don't even have a child. You're living there with my son while I'm drowning in bills. The least you can do is help family. There it was again. The phrase they treated like scripture. Family helps family. Except they only used it when they wanted something. When the call ended, she sounded offended, as if I'd failed some unwritten test. But I didn't know yet that this was only the beginning. A week later, she showed up in person. She didn't knock. She never knocked. I was cooking dinner when I heard her voice behind me. You and that military paycheck think you're better than us. I turned slowly, spatula still in hand. Darlene was standing in my kitchen like she lived there. Her purse thrown onto the counter, eyes already narrowed. Ethan hovered behind her with the expression of a man who knew this was a bad idea but didn't have the spine to stop it. I sighed. Hey, Darlene, what is this about now? She crossed her arms. I need $400 this week, just a loan, and next month I'll need the same until Mom gets settled. Mom was how she referred to herself when she wanted sympathy. $400 was not a loan. It was a demand. And it was expanding. I put the spatula down carefully, the same way I lowered gear during a tense domestic call. Darlene, I'm not giving you my BAH or $400 or anything else. She stepped closer. Her voice dropped low and poison sweet. You think you're too good for us. You think that uniform makes you untouchable. You think we owe you respect. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest, the one that told me the situation was edging towards something darker. This wasn't a simple argument anymore. This was coercion. Ethan finally spoke. Maddie, maybe just this once. She needs help. I whipped my head toward him. Are you serious? I asked quietly. Your mother has asked for money 8 times this month. She barged into our house last week. She's demanding my military benefits. And you want me to give more? Ethan looked down at the floor. She's stressed. She doesn't have what we have. What we have. The phrase dug into me like a hook. What we have, except everything we had, came from my service, my pay, my benefits, my discipline, my sacrifice. Not his. Never his. Darlene pointed a finger at me, her nail tapping the air with accusation. You owe this family. You owe me. I let your husband marry you. The words were so absurd, I actually blinked. Let me marry him, I repeated slowly. Ethan didn't correct her. He didn't laugh. He didn't say, Mom, that's enough. He didn't say one thing to rein her in. He just stood there silently, letting her claim ownership over my marriage like she had signed the certificate herself. Something cold slid down my spine. Not fear, recognition. I was being isolated. That's how financial abusers start. They break down your confidence. They rewrite your history. They redefine your obligations. They corner you until saying no feels dangerous. Darlene took another step. Her eyes were sharp, glinting with something darker than entitlement. If you won't help family, don't expect family to help you. I stared at her, at the woman who believed my labor belonged to her, who saw my service as a resource for her convenience, who thought my lack of children meant I owed her more. I kept my voice level. I don't need anything from you. She laughed, a cold, dismissive laugh that made my jaw clench. Not yet you don't, but you will. Ethan pulled her back gently, whispering something to calm her. She let him guide her toward the door, but not before turning her head over her shoulder and repeating the threat. You will. When the door closed, the air in the house didn't settle. It hung thick, charged wrong. Ethan tried to speak, but I raised a hand to stop him. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Anger is loud. What I felt was something quieter, something heavier, something that slid its weight into my bones. Awareness. They weren't just overbearing. They weren't just needy. They weren't just entitled. They were building a system around me, one where I was the provider, the fixer, the financial backbone, the one who always gave and never received. A system where they were the victims and I was the resource. A system where my no meant defiance, and defiance had consequences. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, replaying every word, every demand, every accusation. The cracks were turning into fractures, and the fractures were spreading. I didn't know it yet, but I was standing at the edge of something much darker than a financial dispute. I was standing at the beginning of psychological warfare, the kind families wage behind closed doors, the kind that leaves no bruises but all the damage in the world. The real turning point in their manipulation came disguised as a family discussion, though nothing about it resembled a discussion. It started with a simple text Ethan sent while I was still on duty. "We need to talk tonight. Mom has a plan." Those 5 words told me everything I needed to know. When the Wolf family had a plan, it always involved my bank account, my benefits, or my compliance. I stepped through the door that evening and found all 3 of them sitting in my living room. Darlene on the couch, Brianna perched on the armrest, Ethan pacing like he was preparing for a negotiation. The moment I entered, Brianna straightened with the smug confidence of someone who believed the verdict had already been decided. Darlene didn't waste a second. "We found a house we want. A nice one. 3 bedrooms. Good neighborhood. We put in an offer today." For a second, I just stared. I had been awake since 4 in the morning, handled 3 domestic disputes, a housing noise complaint, and spent 2 hours writing reports. My brain was still running on military precision. Maybe that was why it took me a second to understand what she was saying. "You put in an offer," I asked carefully. "Without pre-approval, without financing, without anything." Brianna crossed her legs and waved her hand like she was brushing away a fly. "Relax, Maddie. That is where you come in." My stomach dropped. "Here it comes." Ethan stopped pacing and turned toward me with a strange combination of discomfort and determination on his face. "Mom needs you to apply for a VA loan under your name. Then we will put the house under our family trust. Our family trust. Not mine, not his and mine. Theirs." I stood still, feeling a slow, cold wave of disbelief wash through me. Darlene leaned forward. "You will get better interest rates. Better terms. We will qualify because of your service. It is the smartest financial move for everyone. Everyone except me." I took a breath, the kind I used on violent calls to keep the situation from spiraling. "Darlene, that is illegal. The VA loan is for the service member's primary residence. Mine. Not yours. Not a family trust. Not an investment property. I would be violating federal law and military policy." Brianna scoffed loudly. "Oh, please! Everyone bends rules. You are acting like the VA police will break down your door." She had no idea how serious those words were. VA loan fraud was not just a military violation, it was a federal offense. My career, my clearance, my reputation, all of it could disappear with one signature. I kept my voice steady. "I am not doing that." Darlene's face hardened instantly. "Then you are saying you don't care if we lose the house? You are saying we are not your family. You are choosing strangers over us." I blinked at her. They had already lost the house by placing an offer they couldn't pay for. But in their minds, their recklessness was my responsibility to fix. Ethan sat down beside her. "Maddie, she is right. This is the smart thing to do. You make steady money. The Army gives you everything. They take care of you. You could help us without even feeling it." Without even feeling it, as if my entire financial stability existed to cushion their poor decisions. I shook my head. "Absolutely not." Darlene slammed her palm on the coffee table. You selfish girl. Everything we have done for you, and you will not lift a finger for us. Everything they had done for me. The words were so absurd I almost laughed. What exactly have you done for me? I asked quietly. The room went silent. Brianna's eyes flashed with irritation. She jumped in immediately. We welcomed you into this family. We supported you while you were deployed. We were there for you. Supported me, I thought, by calling me for money, by invading my home, by demanding access to my finances. That was their version of support. Darlene lifted her chin. We deserve better than this. After everything. After what? Everything. Losing their temper after I refused to risk prison for a house they wanted, their entitlement was so loud it filled every corner of the room. I spoke clearly, calmly, without raising my voice. I am not putting a house in my name for any of you. Period. Brianna rolled her eyes dramatically. She snapped her fingers once as if she had just remembered another tactic. Fine. If you will not help in person, then you will help publicly. She unlocked her phone and showed me a screen. A group chat, a newly created one. Its title made my stomach drop. Real Family Support Group. She added nearly everyone in the Wolf family. Aunts, cousins, extended relatives I had met only once. People I barely knew. People she wanted as an audience. Before I could say a word, my phone buzzed. Then again, and again. Notifications flashing like warning sirens. Brianna raised her chin. You can explain to everyone why you refuse to help your mother-in-law get a safe place to live. You can tell them your military benefits are more important than family. I opened the chat. Message after message filled the screen. Why won't you help? Darlene said you refused to sign. Who refuses a veteran's mother? That uniform must have gone to your head. You must think you are better than us. I felt heat crawling up my neck. This wasn't just manipulative. This was orchestrated humiliation. A public shaming campaign designed to force compliance. Ethan leaned toward me. Maddie, just talk to them. They need to understand. They need to understand that I will not commit mortgage fraud, I snapped. But even then, I kept my voice controlled. MPs are trained to hold their ground without escalating. Ethan's face shifted. Anger. Embarrassment. Something uglier behind his eyes. He stood up, pointed at my uniform, and said the words that cracked something deep inside me. You know what your problem is? You are a disrespectful soldier. The room went dead still. I stared at him, my mind catching on each word like barbs. Disrespectful soldier. It did not even make sense. He said it like an insult he had been waiting to use. Like he had heard it somewhere from someone who resented my stability, my discipline, my service. And then it hit me. He had heard it. From Brianna. She had likely said it behind my back, maybe even to him directly. You think you are better than us because of your rank, because of your paycheck, because of your benefits. The comments she had hinted at earlier now formed a clear picture. She resented that I outranked her, that I earned respect she didn't have, that my discipline gave me a life she felt entitled to claim. Ethan exhaled hard. Maddie, you make everything difficult. You embarrass this family. You refuse to help. You act like your job makes you superior. My job, my service, my life, turned into ammunition against me. The manipulation was no longer subtle. It was a full offensive. I stood slowly. I felt strangely calm, the way I always felt before stepping into a volatile domestic call. Except this one was inside my own living room. I said clearly I will not be signing anything. I will not be giving my BAH. I will not put a house in my name. And none of you will ever speak to me like this again. Brianna laughed in disbelief. Wow. She actually thinks she has a choice in this. Ethan muttered. Maddie, you are supposed to be loyal. Loyal. That was the moment I understood something essential. They didn't want a relationship. They wanted ownership. They wanted access. They wanted a soldier's stability without ever earning anything themselves. And when I refused to hand it over, they attacked my character, my service, my identity. Something deep in my chest hardened. Something cold. Something steady. Something unbreakable. I did not say another word. I walked to the bedroom, closed the door, and added every new message to my documentation folder. I didn't know when I would need the evidence, but I knew I would, because people who weaponize family never stop until someone makes them, and I was done being their weapon. I used to think pressure showed itself through yelling, slamming doors, or someone losing their temper, but the worst kind comes quietly, slowly, like a rope being pulled tighter every day until you realize it's wrapped around your neck. After the group chat incident, the Wolf family changed tactics. They stopped pretending it was a request. It became an expectation, an obligation, a requirement. The next escalation came 3 days later. I had a 12-hour shift followed by an incident report that kept me an extra 2. By the time I walked into the house, my eyes burned and my legs felt like lead. But the moment I stepped inside, I could feel the tension waiting for me like a loaded trap. Ethan stood in the living room with his arms crossed. His mother sat on the couch. Brianna leaned against the wall, scrolling on her phone like she was bored with the whole thing. My stomach sank. Not this again. Ethan didn't waste time. Sit down, Maddie. We need to talk. No hello. No softness. Just command. The same tone he had absorbed from his family, the tone he never earned but used anyway. I didn't sit. I stayed standing still in uniform, my boots heavy on the floor. What is it this time? I asked quietly. Darlene lifted a folder papers already printed, already filled out in some sections. VA loan application forms. My heart thudded once hard. She tapped the papers like a dealer tapping a card. These are the documents you need to sign. We are doing this now. Something cold slid down my spine. No. Brianna laughed sharply. Then let me make this simple. If you don't sign this week, this family considers you dead to us. My jaw tightened. Dead to them. Over a house that wasn't theirs. Over a benefit that wasn't theirs. Over a loan that could end my career if misused. I felt my heartbeat steady the way it always did during conflict. MPs are trained to activate calm when everyone else spirals. I said again slowly, No. Darlene slammed the folder on the coffee table. You ungrateful girl. You have everything handed to you in the army and you won't share a thing. You don't have a baby to take care of. You don't have real responsibilities. You owe us this. The disrespect rolled off her in waves. Ethan stepped closer. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the cruelty of someone who thinks he has power. Sign the papers, Maddie. You're blowing this out of proportion. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. A federal mortgage program tied to my service. A legal violation. A career-ending action. A dischargeable offense. A felony if misused. I stared at him. If I do this, I could lose my rank, my job, my benefits, my future, my clearance. Ethan shrugged. You're being dramatic. Thousands of people do this. Brianna chimed in. Yeah, and nobody cares. The Army owes you. It's not like you earned those benefits anyway. My hands curled into fists at my sides. I could feel the heat rising in my body, not from anger, but from the realization that they truly believed they were entitled to everything I had. Ethan took a step closer, his voice dropping low. If you won't help your family, then maybe you shouldn't be part of this family. The threat hung in the air. Finally, he said it. Divorce, the most predictable weapon of the weak. I looked at him carefully. After everything I've done for you, your first instinct is to threaten divorce because you won't commit fraud. He didn't flinch. He held his ground probably for the first time in his life, and it wasn't courage. It was manipulation wrapped in false confidence. Brianna folded her arms. Go ahead, Ethan. Do it. She doesn't care about us. She's never cared. She thinks she's too good for this family because she wears that uniform, the uniform. They always circled back to it, as if my rank, my service, my stability were personal insults directed at them. Something inside me, something small and fragile, finally cracked. I stepped back until my shoulder touched the wall. I needed to breathe. I needed space. Ethan followed, crowding me, trying to corner me into submission the same way he always had when he wanted to bulldoze over my boundaries. "Sign the papers, Maddie. Do not make me choose between you and my family." My voice came out steady. "You already chose." The silence that followed was sharp. Darlene stood. Brianna smirked. Ethan's jaw clenched, but for the first time in years, I saw the truth clearly. They weren't asking. They were demanding. They weren't family. They were a hive, a system of dependency, a structure built entirely on me, holding everything up while being blamed for every crack. And I was done being the structure. Without another word, I walked into the bedroom and closed the door. Ethan banged on it twice, shouting something about betrayal. Brianna yelled that I would regret this. Darlene shouted that I had no respect for family. I ignored all of it. Instead, I opened my documentation folder. I added more screenshots, more audio, more texts, more evidence of pressure coercion, emotional abuse, and financial exploitation. Evidence I didn't know I would need yet, but some instinct told me everything was about to break wide open. The next morning, I walked into the company office wearing my uniform hair tight in a bun, face composed. Captain Liam Mercer glanced up from his desk. He was a steady commander, fair, direct, unshaken by much. "Kane," he said, studying me with a slightly narrowed gaze. "You all right, Sergeant?" "You look worn thin." Those words hit harder than I expected, because for the first time in months, someone actually noticed. Someone didn't demand. Someone asked. I swallowed. "I'm fine, sir." He looked at me a long moment, then closed his laptop gently. "Sit. Now." It wasn't an order. It was concern disguised as command, the kind only the best officers used. I sat. He rested his arms on the desk. "I'm not blind. You've been off. Your reports are still immaculate, your performance still sharp, but you look like you've got a storm at home." The sentence almost broke me, but soldiers don't break in front of their commanders. I nodded once. "Just stress, sir." He let the silence hang. "Kane, I need to know if this is something that affects your readiness, something that could compromise you." A slow breath escaped me. It wasn't enough to explain everything, but it was enough for him to understand something more serious was going on. I said, "It's personal, sir, but it's getting harder to manage." He nodded once, not dismissive, not annoyed, just aware. "You come see me if it gets worse." That's an order. It was the closest thing to support I had felt in months. But he had no idea that outside the walls of this unit, my marriage was collapsing under manipulation so thick I could barely breathe. And he had no idea Brianna and Darlene were about to escalate again. Because people like them don't stop when you say no. They double down, they strike harder, they twist deeper. And I knew, though I couldn't prove it yet, that the storm brewing at home was far from its final form. I was right. The pressure was about to turn violent. It happened on a Sunday morning, the kind of quiet morning when nothing should break. The sun had barely risen over Fort Campbell, casting long, soft beams across the base housing row. I had brewed a fresh pot of coffee, the smell drifting through the kitchen as I stood barefoot on the tile in my PT shirt, finally feeling a small moment of calm after weeks of escalating chaos. I remember thinking about taking a run later, maybe clearing my head before the next duty week. I didn't know that within minutes the smell of coffee would forever change for me. I heard footsteps approaching the door, fast, confident wrong. Then, without a knock, the door swung open, slamming lightly against the wall. Brianna walked in like she owned the entire building, not just my house. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, her face twisted with determination, and her eyes locked on me like I was prey. She didn't bother with greeting or explanation. She stormed straight into the kitchen where I stood. "We need to settle this now," she snapped. I set the mug down slowly. "Settle what?" Her voice rose instantly. "Stop pretending you don't know. Mom said you ignored her messages. Ethan said you won't return his calls. You're dragging this out to punish us." I stayed calm the way the Army taught me to be calm, even when a situation was turning volatile. "Brianna, I am not signing the VA loan." Her posture stiffened like a wire pulled tight. You think you can just walk around acting so righteous. You think you're better than us because you're in the army. You think wearing that stupid uniform means you're above family." My chest tightened. I said quietly, "I'm not breaking the law, and I'm not giving you access to my benefits." She stepped closer, too close, her voice shaking with fury. "Don't talk to me like I'm stupid. We need that house. We already put down the deposit. If we lose it, it's on you." My heartbeat slowed in that strange way it always did when things were about to get dangerous. "You put down a deposit without financing," I asked. "You did that knowing you couldn't afford the house. And now you're angry at me because I won't commit loan fraud to fix it." Ethan's footsteps pounded down the hallway. He appeared behind Brianna, half awake. Shirt-wrinkled hair, messy, but his expression already set against me. "Bree, calm down. I'll handle it." Then he turned toward me with a coldness I had never seen before. "You could stop all of this, Maddie. You're choosing not to." I stared at him. "Choosing not to ruin my career. Choosing not to commit a felony. Choosing not to hand over my financial identity. Choosing not to be your personal bank." Ethan groaned. "You're being dramatic. Stop making this difficult." Brianna snapped. "She's always been like this. Always selfish. Always thinking she's better." Her voice climbed until the words were almost shrieks. "You owe us. You owe our family. You owe my mom." Something inside me cracked, a small, quiet crack. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move. I just said the truth. "I owe you nothing." The room froze. Brianna's eyes sharpened. Ethan tensed. Even the air seemed to shift. I watched something dark flicker across Brianna's face. Rage. Pure, unfiltered rage. She looked around the kitchen, frantically searching, scanning, until her eyes landed on the coffee pot on the counter. Fresh. Steaming. Still. Nearly full. My breath caught. "Brianna, don't." But she already had her hand around the handle. She yanked the pot off the hot plate so fast that the cord jerked behind it. The coffee sloshed inside, splashing up the sides. She took one step toward me, then another. Ethan didn't move. Not one step, not one sound. He stood perfectly still, watching. I backed up until my hips hit the counter. The pot lifted higher. She screamed, "You don't get to ruin our lives!" And the world exploded. Heat hit my face and neck like a burning wave, scalding deep, unforgiving, vicious. It felt like fire, like the sun crashing onto my skin. I gasped, grabbing my cheek, my neck, anything I could reach, but the pain spread faster than my hands could follow. It was instant, violent, blinding. Coffee soaked my PT shirt, dripping down my collarbone, burning through the thin fabric. My knees buckled. I stumbled against the counter, struggling to stay upright as white-hot pain pulsed everywhere the liquid touched. I heard my own voice gasp, broken and raw. I heard the pot hit the counter with a sharp, metallic clang. I heard Ethan curse under his breath, but the sound that cut through everything, the sound that I still hear sometimes in the dead quiet of night, came from the hallway. A child's voice, high-pitched, horrified, trembling. "Mom, stop hurting Aunt Madison." I turned toward the doorway through the haze of pain. Brianna's daughter stood there barefoot, wearing a little unicorn sleep shirt, eyes wide with terror. Her small hands were shaking, her mouth hung open in disbelief, and she was crying, sobbing, watching her mother scald me. Brianna whirled around. "Go back to your room, now!" But the girl shook her head violently. "Don't hurt her! Don't hurt her again!" Again. That single word hit me harder than the burning coffee. Again. How many times had the child seen Brianna lose control? How many smaller violences had she witnessed? How long had she been learning that this was normal? Ethan didn't go to the child. He didn't go to me. He just stood there, frozen, helpless, a spectator to his sister's violence, too weak or too complicit to intervene. Brianna dropped the pot onto the counter with a deliberate, frightening calm. "See?" she said, still glaring at her daughter. "This is what happens when people betray family." I staggered toward the sink, turning on the faucet with trembling hands, splashing cold water on my neck, my jaw, my collarbone. The contact made the pain roar even louder. My vision blurred. The room tilted. Ethan finally moved, but not toward me. He walked to Brianna instead. He whispered something I couldn't hear. She shook her head. He sighed. He still didn't look at me. Not once. I pressed my palms against the edge of the sink to keep myself upright. My breath came in ragged bursts. Tears stung my eyes from the pain. My skin felt like it was peeling from the inside. Every second stretched into an eternity. The little girl was still crying, still staring, still shaking. Ethan finally spoke in a low, irritated voice. "Maddie, you should not have pushed her." I froze. The pain didn't freeze. The burn didn't ease. But something inside me did. Something deep. Something cold. Something final. I stood up straighter despite the pain. Water dripped from my chin. My voice came out quiet, controlled. Dead calm. "She attacked me." Ethan shrugged. "You provoked her. People do crazy things when you push them." My chest tightened with something I hadn't felt in a long time. Clarity. Pure, icy clarity. This wasn't a moment of anger gone too far. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't stress. It was the truth laid bare. They believed I was responsible for their actions. They believed hurting me was justified. They believed I should pay for their mistakes with my safety, my body, my career, my future. I looked at the little girl again, still trembling in the doorway, and something inside me hardened. I knew right then that this moment wasn't just about me. It was about her too, because children who witness violence grow up believing it's part of love, and I refused to let her think that. I stepped away from the sink slowly, the sting still burning deep into my skin. Ethan watched, but didn't move. Brianna glared, but didn't apologize. The child cried, but didn't look away. And I made a silent promise in that moment, a promise stronger than any oath I had given in uniform. This ends now. And 4 months later, in a Nashville courtroom packed with people who had no idea how deep this family's cruelty ran, Brianna would fall to her knees and beg. But by then, the truth would be undeniable. And it would be far too late. I don't remember the drive to Blanchfield Army Community Hospital. I don't remember climbing into the car. I don't remember the seatbelt or the road or the turns. What I do remember is the pain. A deep, burning throb that pulsed with my heartbeat, spreading across the left side of my face, down my neck, and into the collar of my shirt. Every breath felt like fire dragging across raw skin. Every second stretched like a wire pulled tight. The emergency staff moved fast the moment I staggered through the doors in my PT uniform, clutching my neck. A nurse ran toward me, eyes wide with recognition and alarm. Sergeant Kane. What happened? I could barely speak. Hot? Coffee? The nurse guided me to a chair as another medic rushed over with a burn assessment kit. His hands moved steady and practiced, but his eyes flickered with quiet disbelief as he examined the red, blistering patches along my jawline and collarbone. They asked whether the liquid was oil chemical or boiling water. When I said coffee straight from the pot, both medics winced. Burn depth, 2nd degree, possibly deeper in a few areas. No full thickness involvement yet. They documented everything. They photographed everything. Not graphic, just clear images for medical necessity. The camera flash stung even when the light was soft. Each time it clicked, I felt another layer of humiliation settle onto my skin. These weren't battle injuries. These weren't training accidents. These were wounds inflicted inside my home. The attending physician, a middle-aged Army doctor with a calm but firm voice, stepped close, studying my burns with a level of focus that told me he'd seen far worse in deployed settings, but this was different. "How did this happen?" he asked gently. I hesitated, the answer catching in my throat. I wanted to say it. I wanted to tell the truth. But an image flashed in my mind. Ethan standing motionless watching the attack without lifting a hand to stop it. Ethan whispering to his sister instead of rushing to help me. Ethan blaming me for provoking her. My chest tightened painfully. The doctor waited. I opened my mouth, closed it, then forced out the softest version of the truth. It was an accident. His eyes narrowed slightly. He didn't challenge me, but something in his expression told me he didn't believe a word of it. He left, briefly returning with a young social worker wearing a badge and holding a clipboard. She sat beside me, her voice warm and steady. "Madison, I'm here to make sure you're safe. Burns like this doesn't happen accidentally very often. Are you comfortable telling me what really happened?" I stared at her hands instead of her face. My voice felt trapped inside my chest, caged behind fear and shame. I shook my head. "I'm fine." She asked another question, and another, each one carefully constructed to give me space to admit the truth. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because admitting the truth meant detonating my entire life at once. Admitting the truth meant Ethan would face consequences. Admitting the truth meant Brianna might lose custody. Admitting the truth meant the military would intervene. And admitting the truth meant people outside the family would finally see the rot inside the Wolf household. I wasn't ready for that storm, so I gave her the same answer soldiers give when they're trained to protect everyone but themselves. "I'm fine. It was an accident." The social worker didn't believe me. She documented that too. The doctor returned, covered my burns in silver sulfadiazine cream, wrapped me in sterile pads, and scheduled follow-up visits. He gave strict orders about infection prevention and scarring protocols. Then he paused at the door and said something in a quiet voice. "I've seen soldiers hide the truth to protect others. But burns don't lie. If you need help later, don't wait until it's too late." Those words hit me harder than the burn, because deep down I knew he was right. When I returned to base housing that evening, the house was empty. Ethan left a note that said, "We need space. I'll be with Mom tonight." The handwriting was rushed. I stood in the living room clutching the note, my neck throbbing, my skin wrapped in gauze, and all I felt was an ache deeper than the burn. Not sadness, not anger. Just the numb awareness that the person who was supposed to protect me had abandoned me on the very day his sister attacked me. The next morning, I dragged myself into the unit headquarters. I thought I could quietly slip in handle paperwork, pretend everything was normal, but the moment I stepped inside the company office, Captain Mercer looked up at me and froze. "Kane, into my office. Now." His voice was low, sharp, commanding in a way that cut through the haze in my mind. I followed him in. He shut the door. Then he stared at the side of my face where the edge of the bandage peeked from my collar. What happened? That was the question I'd been dreading since the moment I left the hospital. I swallowed hard. "Training accident, sir. Hot water spill." His eyebrows lowered. "That's your story, Sergeant." He wasn't yelling. He wasn't accusing. His tone was quiet. Controlled, serious, which somehow made it harder to lie. He leaned forward slightly. "You expect me to believe that a heating spill causes splatter burns. You have directional burns, high temperature, upper body concentrated, not accidental." I looked down at my boots. My throat tightened. My mind screamed at me to tell the truth, but my heart still clung to the lie that protecting Ethan, protecting Brianna's child, protecting this fragile illusion of family was necessary. Captain Mercer exhaled sharply. "I'm going to say this once. You are a staff sergeant in the United States Army. If something happened to you, I need to know. If you're being threatened or harmed, I need to know. If someone inside your home is a danger, I need to know for your safety and the units." The room felt like it was closing in on me. My pulse pounded in my ears. I forced the lie out with difficulty. "It was an accident, sir." I slipped and spilled coffee. His jaw tightened, not in anger and frustration. He recognized the walls I was putting up, but also knew he couldn't tear them down without evidence. He tapped his pen once against the table. "As your commander, I'm obligated to document potential domestic concerns. Expect a wellness follow-up, and expect behavioral health to reach out." My stomach twisted. A wellness follow-up meant more questions. Behavioral health meant documented counseling sessions. And all of that meant the Army would soon discover the truth I was trying to hide. As I stood to leave, he spoke one last time. "Kane, whatever this is, it won't stay buried. Pain shows up eventually. I walked out of his office feeling split down the middle. Part of me was relieved he noticed. Part of me was terrified he noticed. And part of me was drowning in a guilt I couldn't shake. Because even though Brianna caused the burns, even though Ethan stood there doing nothing, even though they'd manipulated and threatened and cornered me for months, I still felt like exposing them would destroy something beyond repair. I stood in the hallway, my hand gently touching the bandaged burn, and realized what the conflict truly was. I wasn't choosing between telling the truth or staying silent. I was choosing between myself and the illusion of family I had been clinging to for years. And for the first time, I felt the weight of that choice pressing down on me like a mountain. But I didn't know then that things were already spiraling beyond my control. The truth would come out. In the worst, loudest, most public way possible. And when it did, the Wolf family's empire of manipulation would crack open for everyone to see. I did not wake up the next morning planning revenge. I woke up planning survival. My face throbbed as the burn dressings tugged against new skin. The medic's warning echoed in my mind every time I moved. Burns don't lie. Captain Mercer's voice echoed with it, pain shows up eventually. I had tried hiding everything for years. I had tried protecting Ethan. I had tried protecting his family. What I hadn't realized was that I had never protected myself. That morning, I sat at the small dining table in the base housing kitchen, a cup of cold water in hand, staring at the empty chair where Ethan usually drank his coffee before PT. Except Ethan hadn't come home after the attack. And he hadn't texted. Not to check if I was alive. Not to check if I was okay. Not to apologize. I took a shaky breath and opened my phone. A single text appeared from him at 2:11 a.m. "You made Brianna freak out. She didn't mean to do it. Stop acting dramatic." The words squeezed my lungs until I could barely breathe. Brianna attacked me, with boiling coffee, in my own home. And yet somehow Ethan still found a way to blame me. The room spun for a second, but then another feeling rose up from deep inside my chest. Not sadness, not fear. Something colder, something sharper. Something that felt like the first step out of a cage. Enough. I opened the Messages app, scrolled to the beginning of the Wolf family's group chats, and began screenshotting everything. Every guilt trip, every threat, every manipulation, every time they had called me disrespectful, every time they had implied that my paychecks belonged to them. I saved each screenshot into a locked folder. Then I backed that folder up twice, one in the cloud, one on an encrypted drive. That was the hour I realized something profound. I had spent years believing their version of reality because there was never proof of the conversations, never evidence of the pressure, never a paper trail of the financial exploitation. But now, for the first time, everything they said, everything they threatened, everything they demanded would be saved, and they would never be able to twist it again. I looked up slowly, my gaze drifting toward the door where Brianna had walked in without knocking, the same door she'd used to barge into my home dozens of times. Suddenly, I remembered something important. The doorbell camera. Ethan had installed it 6 months earlier after a neighbor's car was broken into. Brianna had complained about it then, saying something about how it made her feel judged. It wasn't until that moment that the memory hit me. The attack happened in the kitchen, but the argument started at the door, and the camera always recorded 30 seconds before motion detection. I felt my pulse quicken. I stood up, walked toward the door, pulled out my phone, opened the doorbell, camera app, and scrolled through the archive. There she was, Brianna, pacing outside my door, holding a thermos. Not a mug, a thermos. My stomach dropped. She hadn't grabbed a cup of coffee off my counter in a moment of rage. She had brought it. She had brought boiling coffee to my home. She came prepared. My hands trembled as I pressed play. Her voice came through the speaker as clear as if she stood beside me. "If she doesn't sign that loan today, I swear I'll make her." My breath caught. The doorbell camera caught all of it. Every word, every threat, every moment of premeditation. When I saved the clip, a strange sense of clarity washed over me. I wasn't documenting for revenge. I was documenting so no one would ever gaslight me again. My phone buzzed. Ethan. He finally texted again. The message made my blood run cold. You know you pushed her. If you hadn't provoked her, she wouldn't have snapped. You embarrassed her in front of Mom. Apologize. I stared at the screen with disbelief, then anger, then a chilling kind of calm. No yelling, no crying, no shaking. Just an icy silence that settled deep in my bones. I typed back slowly. I was burned. His reply came instantly. Stop blaming her. You always make everything about you. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Instead of responding, I took screenshots. Then more screenshots. Then I scrolled further back to messages I had ignored for years. Ethan asking for money because he forgot to pay the electric bill. Ethan complaining that I wasn't financially supportive enough when I was the only one working overtime. Ethan saying real military wives didn't argue about money. Ethan saying soldiers should help family because that's what strong women do. Every line documented, every manipulation frozen in pixels. I saved them all. I didn't realize it then, but that was the exact moment revenge began to take shape. It didn't come from rage. It came from truth. And the truth was finally on my side. That afternoon, I set my phone on the kitchen counter and stared at it for long minutes. Something still gnawed at me. The attack happened in the kitchen, but did Ethan stand back the entire time? The doorbell footage ended when she walked in. The rest of the room had been captured by something else. The baby monitor. Brianna had brought her son over many times. She always used the portable baby monitor so she could walk around the house without losing track of him. Last week, she'd forgotten it. It was still plugged in on top of my fridge. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I climbed onto a chair, grabbed the monitor, and turned it on. The camera had been plugged in, powered, and recording the entire time. It wasn't part of a smart home system. It stored locally, meaning everything that happened in my kitchen that morning might be on that memory card. My hands shook so violently I could barely open the back latch. I pulled the card out, inserted it into my laptop, and waited. The video popped up instantly. No password, no encryption, just raw footage. And there it was, Brianna entering the kitchen, me standing near the counter, Ethan sitting on the couch in the background. And then the moment that changed everything. The attack, the sound of boiling liquid hitting skin. My scream, Ethan not moving. The child screaming, Brianna grabbing her son's hand and yanking him back. Ethan standing only after everything was over. I watched the footage once, then I watched it twice. Then I watched it a third time, and the whole time my jaw clenched harder. My breath grew slower, my vision sharpened. It was the first time I had ever witnessed the truth from the outside, and it was horrifying. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't a sudden mistake. It wasn't a fit of rage. It was deliberate, cold, controlled, and Ethan didn't try to stop it. When I finally breathed again, the video file sat open before me, time-stamped and irrefutable. This wasn't just evidence. This was the end of their narrative. This was the destruction of every lie they had built together. And as I sat there staring at the screen, something inside me clicked into place. A shift, a resolve, a steady, unwavering determination that rose like steel in my spine. They thought I was weak because I stayed silent. They thought I would keep covering for them. They thought I would protect them even after they hurt me. They were wrong. For the first time in years, I wasn't scared of what they would say. I wasn't scared of being alone. I wasn't scared of breaking the family apart. I was scared of what would happen if I didn't. I gathered everything: screenshots, videos, voicemails, threats, messages, doorbell recordings, baby monitor footage, medical records, burn documentation, social worker notes. I organized everything into folders: physical, verbal, financial. Then I made a copy of every file onto a flash drive. Then another copy on the cloud. Then another on a private drive stored in my wall safe. By the time the sun set, I had built the case they never expected me to build. A case that would expose them. A case that would crush their manipulations. A case that would finally give me control over my own life again. I hadn't meant to seek revenge. But revenge had quietly stepped into my kitchen that day and sat down beside me. Not the kind that destroys, the kind that reveals, the kind that protects, the kind that ends the cycle once and for all. I stared at the flash drive resting in my palm. Small, silver, quiet, but powerful enough to change everything. And that was the night I whispered to the empty kitchen, my voice low and steady. I'm done protecting them. Now, I protect myself. And with that single sentence, the justice arc truly began. I thought the worst was behind me after collecting all the evidence. I thought once I had the truth documented in videos and screenshots, the noise would finally stop. But people like Ethan and Brianna don't let go quietly. They don't allow accountability to land. They double down. They twist reality until you wonder if you imagined everything. And sometimes their most dangerous weapon isn't rage. It's an apology delivered too late, too sweet, too rehearsed. Ethan came home 2 days after the attack, right after morning formation, still wearing his civilian clothes like he had spent the night anywhere but at home. His hair was messy, his eyes tired. He stepped through the door and let it close softly behind him. He didn't rush to me. He didn't check the bandages on my face. He didn't ask if I was in pain. Instead, he sighed dramatically like he was the one who had been through trauma. "Maddie," he said quietly. "We need to talk." I stayed sitting on the couch laptop, open flash drive beside me. Not fear, not weakness, just preparation. Whatever he said next would join the file. He walked over slowly, hands shoved in his pockets, pretending he was hesitant, pretending he was nervous, pretending he cared. "Look, I'm sorry about what happened." He paused, expecting that alone to fix everything. I waited. He continued. "Brianna didn't mean to do it. She just gets overwhelmed sometimes. You know how she is." My jaw tightened. Ethan kept going. "And you should have told us if the loan situation stressed you out that much. You made it seem like you didn't trust us." There it was. The apology that wasn't an apology. The same manipulation pattern I had fallen for 15 times before. "Not this time," I asked quietly. "Where were you when it happened?" Ethan looked genuinely confused. "What do you mean, why didn't you step in when your sister threw boiling coffee on me? Or when your nephew screamed? Or when I fell? Or when I burned?" His face shifted. Annoyance, then defensiveness, then that familiar heat of anger he always tried to hide. "Maddie, why do you always twist things to make them seem worse?" He shook his head, pacing like he was the victim. "You're making this dramatic. You know my anxiety gets bad when there's yelling." "You froze," I said. "You froze and watched your sister burn your wife." He stopped pacing, his expression hardening into something cold. "She didn't burn you. It was just coffee." Something snapped inside me. No. Something aligned. Something straightened. Something clicked. I said it slowly. "Ethan." It was boiling. It was intentional. It was violence. He rubbed his face, frustrated. "You're blowing this up. Brianna feels terrible. She's crying non-stop. And Mom is furious you're making this a big deal." "Mom, of course." Everything came back to his mother. He added quickly. "And Brianna said she'd apologize if you help patch things up, meaning if I paid, if I signed, if I bent again, if I returned to the role they needed me to play." That was when he delivered the part that he thought would fix everything. "Maddie, I love you. I'm sorry. Let's put this behind us." And he stepped closer, arms out, expecting me to fall into the same cycle again. Instead, I stood up, walked around him, and picked up my flash drive. I said calmly, "Sit down, Ethan." He turned confused. "Why?" "Because I'm done." He gave a small laugh. "Done with what?" "The marriage." His mouth fell open. He didn't process it. He didn't believe it. He thought I was bluffing. "Maddie, come on, don't be ridiculous." I faced him fully. "I'm filing for divorce, and I'm getting a protective order." He blinked once, twice, 3 times. Then the denial came like a tidal wave. "What are you insane? A protective order against who? Against Brianna or me?" His voice cracked on the last word, not from emotion, but from ego. I didn't give him the luxury of an explanation. Instead, I said simply, "Both." He exploded. The apology evaporated. The guilt disappeared. The manipulation mask shattered. He threw his hands in the air. "This is unbelievable. You're seriously going to destroy this family over a cup of coffee. You're going to ruin Brianna's life over one mistake." "She attacked me, Ethan." "She didn't mean to," he roared back. "She brought the coffee," I said. "From home." "In a thermos." He froze, realization flickering across his face. "And you saw it. You watched it happen. And you did nothing." His expression tightened. "You think you're so perfect, don't you? You think you're better than us in that uniform? You think being a soldier makes you special?" "No," I said quietly. "It makes me accountable." His face twisted. "You are not leaving. You are not divorcing me. You are not embarrassing this family. You need to calm down and stop being dramatic." That word again. Dramatic. Every abuser's favorite word. I opened my laptop and clicked on a folder labeled Evidence for Attorney. Ethan stepped backward. "What are you doing?" I said calmly. "Taking back my life." He moved toward me like he meant to grab the laptop, but something stopped him. Maybe the look in my eyes. Maybe the burns still visible on my skin. Maybe the fact that for the first time since I married him, he saw I wasn't scared. I walked past him, picked up my phone, and dialed. A calm male voice answered, Attorney Hart. Samuel Hart, Nashville, a lawyer who specialized in domestic violence coercion and protective orders. "Mr. Hart," I said, my voice steady. "My name is Staff Sergeant Madison Kane. I need legal representation for divorce and a full protective order." He didn't hesitate. "Come to my office tomorrow at 9. Bring everything you have." "I have a lot," I said. "Good." His tone sharpened. "And Sergeant, if someone hurts you, we will document everything. We will protect you." I hung up. Ethan stared at me like he was looking at a stranger. "Maddie, please, think about what you're doing. Once this starts, there's no going back." "Exactly," I said. "That's why I'm doing it." His face crumpled. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked small, frightened. Not for me, for himself, for what losing me meant for his finances, for his stability, for his mother, for Brianna. But I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel revenge. I felt clarity. The breaking point wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. It was steady. It was the moment I stopped begging someone to love me correctly. The moment I stopped shrinking to fit their expectations. The moment I realized they had never wanted a wife. They had wanted a resource, a soldier they didn't have to pay, a paycheck they didn't have to earn, a benefit they didn't deserve. I walked to the door and opened it. Ethan whispered, "Maddie, please don't do this." I turned back, my voice calm, controlled, final. "I'm done letting you hurt me. I'm done letting you use me. And I'm done protecting you from consequences." He didn't follow. He didn't scream. He didn't slam anything. He just sagged onto the couch, hands over his face. I stepped outside into the cool Tennessee air and breathed for the first time in years. The breaking point had come and gone, and now the war would begin. But this time, the battlefield wasn't mine alone. I had evidence. I had clarity. And tomorrow at 9, I would have a lawyer. The Justice Arc had officially entered Phase 2. Attorney Samuel Hart's office in downtown Nashville did not look like the offices of TV lawyers with glossy desks and framed degrees arranged for show. His office was simpler, older solid. Dark wood shelves, a wide oak desk, stacks of case files neatly organized but clearly used. When I walked in wearing civilian clothes and a bandage visible along my jawline, he looked up and studied me with the same calm intensity of a military senior NCO evaluating a soldier who finally admits something is wrong. "Staff Sergeant Kane," he said, standing to shake my hand. "Thank you for coming in. Sit." The firmness in his voice wasn't domineering. It was grounding, the voice of someone who had walked dozens of other victims through the same fire. I sat and placed the folder of evidence on his desk. Flash drive, printed screenshots, doorbell footage summary, baby monitor video transcript, medical documents, notes from the social worker at Blanchfield Hospital. Hart didn't touch any of it immediately. He looked at me first. Tell me everything. When someone says that you expect to hold something back, you expect to hide your shame, you expect the filter of embarrassment to kick in. But something about Hart made the truth spill out clean. I told him about the VA loan pressure, the financial threats, the group chats, Ethan's enabling, Darlene's demands, Brianna's manipulation, the years of guilt, the erosion of boundaries, the slow poisoning of every part of my life. Then I told him about the boiling coffee. Every second, every scream, every moment Ethan stood still. I didn't cry when I spoke. The words came out flat, steady, factual. The way I wrote incident reports, the way soldiers talk about traumatic scenes when they haven't processed them yet. When I finished, Hart opened the folder. He started with the doorbell recording. He read the transcript first, then he watched the video. Not once did he show emotion. Not once did he react. His expression didn't move until the final second. Only then did he exhale slowly. Next, he opened the baby monitor footage. He watched silently. He didn't blink. When it ended, he leaned back in his chair, folded his hands, and said the words that shifted everything inside me. Sergeant Kane, this is domestic violence. I frowned slightly. But she's my stepsister. Domestic violence isn't defined by romantic relationship, he said. It includes household members, family members, people with access to your home. And this is aggravated because it involved boiling liquid and resulted in documented burns. I swallowed. He continued. And this is not only domestic violence. This is coercive control, emotional abuse, financial exploitation, unauthorized intrusion into your home, conspiracy to force you into federal loan fraud, and your husband enabled all of it. I had known it was bad. I had known it was wrong. I had known I was drowning. But hearing a professional categorize each wound, each manipulation, each moment of violence with legal terminology felt like something inside my chest cracked open. It wasn't in my head. It wasn't exaggerated. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was abuse. Real. Documented. Illegal. Hart flipped through the printed screenshots. How long has this been going on? Years, I whispered. His brow furrowed. And you never reported anything. Not wanting to destroy the family? He said, answering his own question. It wasn't judgment. It was recognition. He had seen this pattern before. Victims always protecting the abuser. Victims always minimizing their pain. I nodded. I didn't want Ethan to lose visitation with his nephew. I didn't want to be the reason Brianna couldn't come around anymore. I didn't want to tear the family apart. Hart opened the medical report. The description of second-degree burns, the nurse documenting splatter patterns, the social worker noting signs of emotional distress, the physician recommending follow-up and DV resources. He tapped the page with a pen. You didn't tear this family apart. They did. Your husband allowed violence against you. His sister committed it. His mother encouraged coercion, and they all expected you to stay silent. He leaned forward. Not anymore. He began assembling the legal strategy like someone assembling a battlefield plan. First, we file for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and domestic abuse. Then we request a temporary protective order. We include every screenshot, every video, every message. We request that Brianna be barred from contacting you. We request that Ethan be restricted from financial access until assets are reviewed. Then we pursue criminal charges for assault. My breath caught. Criminal charges. Yes. Brianna threw boiling coffee at a soldier. That is assault with bodily injury. If the DA wants it, they can elevate it, and the footage will make it undeniable. I stared at the desk. Criminal charges. A protective order. Divorce. My life was about to detonate in every direction. Hart must have read my expression because he said the words I didn't know I needed. You are not destroying your life. You are reclaiming it. Next, he pulled out a notepad. I'm going to need someone from your chain of command, someone who can speak to your character, Someone who can testify that your career, your service, your honor are consistent. Immediately a name surfaced. Captain Mercer. Hart nodded approvingly. Good. Officers usually write excellent character letters, especially if they've already noticed signs. He had. He'd seen the exhaustion, the stress, the fear. I texted Captain Mercer asking if I could meet him privately. His reply came within 2 minutes. Come to my office at 1500. Bring whatever you need. When I arrived at the company office, Mercer was alone standing by the window with his arms folded. He turned when I knocked. Come in, Sergeant Kane. Close the door. I did. He studied my face, the bandages along my jawline, the tension in my shoulders. He didn't ask what happened. He said, Tell me how I can support you. My throat tightened. Sir, I need a letter of character. He nodded immediately. For what purpose? Divorce proceedings, protective order, possibly criminal charges. His jaw clenched slightly, not in anger at me, but at whoever had hurt me. Sit down, Sergeant. Tell me everything. For the second time that week, I repeated the story. This time including Ethan's role, the VA loan pressure, the group chat harassment, the attack, the video, the burns, and for the first time in years, I watched a man show anger on my behalf. Not pity, not sympathy. Anger, righteous, sharp, controlled. The kind of anger soldiers feel when one of their own is harmed. When I finished, Mercer sat back. Sergeant Kane, you need to hear this clearly. Nothing you described is acceptable. None of this is your fault, and none of this compromises your standing as an MP. He opened a drawer, took out a formal letterhead, and began typing. I watched as he wrote. Staff Sergeant Madison Kane has served under my command for 3 years. She is disciplined, resilient, and an exemplary soldier. Her conduct, integrity, and professionalism are above reproach. She has reported concerns regarding domestic violence and coercive family pressure. She has my full support in all legal proceedings. He wrote for 10 minutes straight, signed it, stamped it, then handed it to me. Take this to your attorney, and Sergeant. He looked directly at me. You are not alone in this. If anyone retaliates or harasses you, come to me immediately. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Good. Dismissed. Walking out of the office, clutching that letter, something shifted again inside my chest. For the first time in years, someone in authority believed me. Not because I cried, not because I begged, but because the truth was visible, documented, unshakable. Back in Hart's office the next morning, I handed him the letter. He read it and nodded. This will carry weight. Judges take military character statements seriously. It proves you are stable, responsible, and credible. He placed the letter on top of the stack of evidence. Then he looked at me with a seriousness that felt like stepping into a different part of the battlefield. Now we prepare for court. He explained the next steps. Filing the divorce petition, submitting the protective order, delivering evidence to the district attorney for possible assault charges, scheduling the hearing date, preparing testimony, organizing exhibits, building the sequence of events to show coercion escalation, and finally violence. You did everything right, he said. You saved everything. You documented everything. You gave us ammunition most victims never have. That word struck me. Ammunition. Evidence as armor. Proof as protection. Truth as a weapon. He looked me in the eyes. Sergeant Kane, this case is strong. Very strong. We are not going to lose. Fear flickered in my chest. Not because I doubted him, but because the war was no longer theoretical. It had begun. And for the first time, I wasn't fighting alone. I signed the final document. Hart gathered the files, and just like that, the legal machinery began to move. The Wolf family had turned my life into a battlefield, but now, for the first time, I had firepower of my own. The justice arc was no longer forming. It was active, and the court was waiting. Davidson County Family Court did not look like a place where lives could be dismantled in a single morning, but as I walked through the front doors with Attorney Hart beside me, I felt the air shift the way it does before a storm hits. The courthouse was cold, the kind of cold that sinks straight into your bones, and the fluorescent lights made everything feel sharper, harsher, more unforgiving. My uniform wasn't required for the hearing, so I wore a simple navy blouse, slacks, hair tied back. Not polished, not dramatic, just controlled, just steady. Hart pushed the courtroom door open and murmured, "Remember, stay calm. Let the evidence talk." I nodded, but my stomach tightened when I saw Brianna sitting at the respondent's table. She looked nothing like the woman who had thrown boiling coffee on me. She wore a pale pink blouse and a long skirt, her makeup soft. Her hair brushed into waves that made her look angelic. On her lap was a neatly folded tissue that she pressed dramatically against her eyes every few seconds, even though no tears had actually fallen. When she saw me, her expression flickered with something sharp and hateful before she quickly replaced it with a trembling lip. Ethan sat beside her in a button-down shirt he'd probably ironed for the first time in years. He leaned in, whispering instructions, pretending to be the supportive brother, pretending he hadn't watched me burn in our kitchen. He didn't look up when I entered. Guilt might have hit him if he had. Or maybe not. The Wolf family had never let shame interfere with their performance. The bailiff called out firmly, "All rise!" Judge Caroline Whitford walked in, early 50s, sharp eyes, silver streak in her hair. She didn't smile. She didn't soften. She radiated the quiet authority of someone who had seen every lie, every performance, every manipulation staged in her courtroom and had no patience for any of it. "You may be seated." We sat. Hart leaned slightly toward me. "She's fair but strict. Don't react to anything they say. Let them sink themselves." Then he stood as the judge began. "This is case number 23-5478, Kane versus Wolf. Petition for divorce and protective order. Counsel, are you prepared to proceed?" Mr. Hart answered. "Ready, Your Honor." Mr. Sinclair followed. "Ready for the respondent, Your Honor." "Sinclair." Of course they had hired a slick, polished Nashville attorney with a $1,000 tie and a rehearsed pity face, the kind who defended people who didn't deserve defending. Judge Whitford nodded. "Opening statements. Mr. Sinclair, you may proceed." He rose smoothly like he'd practiced in a mirror that morning. "Thank you, Your Honor." His voice was low, sympathetic. He gestured toward Brianna like presenting a fragile porcelain doll. "My client is devastated to be here today. Devastated that her stepsister is making these accusations. Devastated that this family conflict has escalated to court." He paused for effect, ignoring the fact that the only reason we were here was because Brianna had escalated everything with boiling liquid. Sinclair continued, "Ms. Brianna Wolf is a dedicated mother, a caring sister, and a woman who has never been in trouble with the law. She is heartbroken that her sister-in-law, a military police sergeant under significant occupational stress, has misinterpreted a family argument as intentional harm." Misinterpreted. Hart's jaw tightened, but he stayed still. Sinclair kept going, gaining confidence. "The petitioner, Sergeant Kane, suffers from occupational burnout. As a military police NCO, she deals with domestic disputes, high-pressure situations, and traumatic incidents. This has understandably affected her mental well-being and has perhaps caused her to attribute malice where none existed." He turned fully toward the judge. "This case is not about violence, Your Honor. It is about a misunderstanding fueled by stress, overwork, and the emotional exhaustion of a demanding military career." Judge Whitford raised an eyebrow. "And the second-degree burns documented by a physician." Sinclair swallowed. "A tragic accident, Your Honor. A lapse in judgment, yes, but not intentional. My client deeply regrets the incident, and she is prepared to apologize formally in court." That was the moment Brianna dabbed her eyes with the tissue, shaking her head slowly like she could barely live with the guilt of her imaginary mistake. Then the tears started. Real ones. Manipulators cry easily when cornered. Ethan put a hand on her back and whispered something loud enough for the judge to hear. "You're doing great, Bree. Stay strong." The performance was so rehearsed it almost made me laugh, but I stayed still. I didn't blink. I didn't move. Hart stood slowly. "Your Honor." When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but carried across the entire courtroom like a blade slicing through fog. "Opposing counsel's statement contains inaccuracies." Over the next hour, we will present evidence that shows this was not a misunderstanding, not an accident, not occupational confusion. This was premeditated violence, coercive control, financial exploitation, and repeated boundary violations. Brianna's tears suddenly stopped. Hart continued. Furthermore, we will present corroborating medical documentation, recorded threats, video evidence, and expert testimony regarding pattern behavior consistent with domestic violence and coercive manipulation. The courtroom went still. Even Sinclair straightened nervously. Judge Whitford nodded. Proceed with your first witness. The judge didn't ask who. She knew it would be me. Hart touched my arm lightly. It's time, Sergeant. I walked to the witness stand, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore the oath with a steady voice. When I sat down, I felt Ethan's eyes burn into me. Brianna glared like she wanted me to disappear entirely. Hart approached calmly. Sergeant Kane, please describe your relationship with the respondent. I answered simply. She is my stepsister. Her brother Ethan Wolfe is my husband. And during your marriage, did the Wolfe family maintain contact with you? Yes. Frequent and intrusive contact. Did they request financial assistance? They demanded it. There was a murmur in the courtroom. Sinclair immediately objected. Your Honor, the witness is characterizing the interactions rather than stating facts. Judge Whitford held up a hand. Overruled. The witness may continue. Hart nodded. Sergeant, can you explain what you mean by demanded? I explained the group chat pressure, the VA loan fraud attempts, the late-night calls, the manipulation about family loyalty, the disparaging messages when I refused. Hart let the facts land. No dramatics, no exaggeration. Then he asked the question that shifted the courtroom temperature. Sergeant Kane, can you describe the events of June 12th, the morning of the alleged attack? I inhaled slowly and recounted everything. Brianna entering without knocking, the thermos, the argument, the moment she flung the boiling liquid, the burn, the smell of scalded skin, my scream, the child yelling, Ethan doing nothing. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I simply told the truth. When I finished, the courtroom was silent except for Brianna's theatrical sniffles. Hart continued. Did you provoke her? No. Did you physically threaten her? No. Did you touch her? No. Did you invite her into your home that morning? No. Hart let that settle. Then he asked softly. Sergeant, did the respondent bring the coffee from her own home? Yes. How do you know? Because I have video footage. Sinclair jumped up. Objection. Video was not authenticated. Your Honor. Hart calmly set a USB drive onto the evidence table. The footage is time-stamped, recovered from a doorbell camera, and accompanied by a digital forensic verification letter. The judge looked directly at Sinclair. Sit down, counsel. He sank slowly back into his seat. Hart nodded at her. Your Honor, with your permission, I would like to introduce Exhibit A. The judge motioned. Proceed. As Hart connected his laptop to the courtroom monitor, I watched Brianna stiffen. Ethan leaned toward her, whispering frantically. She shook her head, eyes widening. She hadn't expected the video. Abusers never expect proof. The footage began. Brianna pacing outside my door, thermos in hand. Her voice. If she doesn't sign today, I swear I'll make her. The entire courtroom leaned forward. Ethan's face went pale. Brianna froze the tissue falling from her trembling hand. When the video ended, the silence was electric. Judge Whitford leaned back slightly. Her voice was cool and sharp. Miss Wolfe, would you like to explain why you approached your stepsister's home with boiling coffee while making threats? The performance collapsed. Brianna opened her mouth, but no words came out. Sinclair whispered urgently to her. Say stress. Say mistake. Say anything. But Brianna just stared. Judge Whitford turned to Hart. Continue, counsel. Hart nodded. No further questions at this time, Your Honor. Sinclair rose for cross-examination. He straightened his jacket, forcing confidence back into his posture. Sergeant Kane, he said slowly, trying to regain control. Isn't it true you've experienced significant stress from your job as a military police NCO NUM? Isn't it true that exposure to traumatic situations may have heightened your emotional reactions? NUM. Isn't it true that you suffer from anxiety? NUM. Have you ever received mental health counseling? I said firmly. Yes, through Army Behavioral Health. Preventative, routine. No diagnosis. No impairment to duty. And no hallucinations or confusion as you are attempting to imply. Someone in the gallery snorted softly. Sinclair stiffened. He pushed again. Isn't it possible you misinterpreted the tone in the video? No. Isn't it possible your sister-in-law was simply frustrated and not actually threatening? No. Isn't it possible the liquid wasn't actually boiling? No. He exhaled sharply. Sergeant, are you always this combative? I stared directly at him. Only when someone lies about violence. A few people in the back of the courtroom whispered. Sinclair's face flushed bright red. No further questions. He sat down hard. Judge Whitford cleared her throat and looked at Brianna. Miss Wolfe, you will refrain from emotional displays unless directly asked to speak. Brianna nodded meekly. But I knew the meltdown was coming. They always explode before they break. This was only part one, and the storm was building. The real exposure was still ahead. The justice arc was about to reach its sharpest turning point. Judge Whitford adjusted her glasses and said, Mr. Hart, you may proceed with additional evidence. Her calm tone sliced clean through the courtroom, and everyone shifted forward instinctively, sensing something significant was coming. Hart nodded once, picked up the remote, and said clearly, Your Honor, Exhibit B is the kitchen incident from June 12th. This footage was recovered from a baby monitor that the respondent left in the petitioner's home. Video and audio are time-stamped intact and certified. Sinclair jerked up from his chair. Objection, Your Honor! This footage violates the expectation of privacy. The judge didn't even let him finish. Overruled. The device was in the petitioner's home. The petitioner may present any security footage from her residence. Sit down, counsel. Sinclair sat, hard. Brianna's hand flew to her face, but her trembling wasn't contrition. It was panic. Ethan stared at the monitor like it was counting down the seconds to an explosion he couldn't stop. Hart pressed play. The screen lit up with the grainy but unmistakably clear view of my kitchen on the morning of the attack. I could hear my own breath catch when the video started. Brianna entered without knocking, the door swinging open behind her. She held the thermos tightly. My voice sounded exhausted, controlled. Brianna, not today. We already talked about this. Brianne's voice cut through the speakers, sharp and bitter. Sign the loan, Madison. Stop acting like you're above us. My on-screen self shook her head. I told you. I won't risk my career for your mother's house. Brianna stepped closer, her voice rising. You ungrateful, manipulative little... And then the moment everyone had come for, the moment that had changed my life. She uncapped the thermos. Steam rose visibly from the liquid. She flung it directly into my face. The sound of boiling coffee hitting skin echoed through the courtroom speakers, followed by my scream, raw and instinctive. Then the chaos of movement as I collapsed against the counter. The gallery collectively sucked in air. A woman in the back whispered, Oh my God. A man beside her murmured, Jesus Christ. But the part that changed everything wasn't just the attack. It was what came after. Ethan, sitting on the couch, watching, not moving toward me, not calling for help, not even flinching. Brianna grabbed her son's arm as he screamed, Mom, stop hurting Aunt Madison. She snapped back at him. Shut up! It's just coffee. It's her fault. And still, Ethan did not move. The footage ended. The room was silent. Not one cough, not one whisper, not one shifting chair. Even Sinclair looked sick. Judge Whitford stared at the dark screen for several seconds before speaking, voice low but dangerously steady. Miss Wolfe, stand! Brianna rose slowly, shaking violently, mascara already streaking down her cheeks. The judge said, What exactly would you call what I just watched? Brianna's voice cracked. It wasn't like that. I didn't mean... The judge snapped, Do not lie to me. You walked into her home. You poured boiling liquid on her. You screamed at a child. You stood over her while she was burned. And then the judge's voice dropped even lower. And your brother watched. Ethan shrank into his chair like he wanted to vanish. Brianna suddenly exploded into hysterics, her voice sharp, high-pitched, unrestrained. It was just coffee. She deserved it. The entire courtroom recoiled. The words didn't echo in the room they detonated. A woman in the gallery gasped loudly. Someone else muttered, "Oh, hell no." The bailiff stepped closer instinctively. Hart didn't move. He didn't need to. Brianna had just destroyed herself more effectively than any cross-examination could. Judge Whitford froze for one full second before leaning forward slowly, eyebrows raised, voice ice cold. "She deserved it, Miss Wolfe. Repeat what you just said." Brianna swallowed suddenly, understanding the magnitude of her own outburst. "I'm sorry, Your Honor. I didn't mean—" The judge cut her off. "No, you said she deserved it. Explain." Brianna's voice fell apart. "I was stressed. She wouldn't help. She wouldn't sign. She kept acting like she's better than us." Darlene choked out a sob in the gallery. Ethan covered his face. Brianna kept rambling, spiraling without direction. "She always makes things hard. She thinks she's smarter than everyone. She was ruining everything. She wouldn't help family, and she knows Mom needs the house. And she just... The judge slammed her gavel once. "Enough!" The entire courtroom fell silent again. Then the judge looked at Hart. "I assume you have expert testimony to accompany this evidence." Mr. Hart responded, "Yes, Your Honor. I call Dr. Maria Laird and social worker Denise Holloway." A middle-aged emergency physician stepped forward first. Calm, steady, professional. Dr. Laird placed her hand on the Bible and swore in. Hart approached. "Doctor, can you explain the nature of the petitioner's burns?" She nodded. Second-degree partial thickness burns on the left side of the face neck and upper shoulder. Splash pattern consistent with thrown liquid at boiling temperature. Sinclair asked quietly, "Is there any possibility these burns were caused by an accidental spill?" Dr. Laird turned toward him. "No. Accidental spills do not produce symmetrical splash patterns and do not typically hit the face first. These injuries were caused by intentional projection of hot liquid." She stepped down. Then the social worker took the stand. "Ms. Holloway, what was the petitioner's emotional state during your evaluation?" She replied, calm but distressed. "Defensive at first, like many victims of domestic violence who have been conditioned to protect their abusers." The judge's eyes flicked toward Ethan. Ms. Holloway continued, "I assessed risk factors: manipulation by extended family, financial exploitation, emotional abuse, physical assault by a family member, and verbal degradation of a child who witnessed the violence." That last line hit the gallery hard. Several people shook their heads in disgust. When she finished testifying, the judge leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen once, twice, 3 times. The room was dead silent. Then she looked at Brianna and Ethan with an expression that held no softness left. "Miss Wolfe, Mr. Wolfe, before we proceed further, is there anything either of you wants to say?" Ethan stood slowly, trembling. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Brianna burst into tears again. "I didn't mean to hurt her. I swear, she can't do this to our family. She's lying. She wants to ruin us. She wants—" The judge raised her hand sharply. "Stop! Sit down." Brianna collapsed into her chair. The entire courtroom felt thick with tension, the kind that sits heavy on your chest and makes breathing difficult, the kind that precedes a verdict that will change everything. Judge Whitford folded her hands. Her voice was low, almost quiet, but carried enough gravity to command the entire room. "This court has seen manipulative defendants before. I have seen people lie. I have seen people twist narratives. I have seen dysfunctional families weaponize guilt. But Miss Wolfe, what I witnessed today was not confusion. It was not stress. It was not a lapse in judgment. It was cruelty, premeditation, violence, and entitlement so profound it defies comprehension." Ethan swallowed hard. She turned her glare toward him. "And you, Mr. Wolfe, you stood by while your wife was burned. You allowed your sister to assault her. You gaslit her afterward. You minimized her injuries. You are complicit." His face drained of color. The judge turned back to me. "Ms. Kane, you may be seated. You have conducted yourself with restraint and dignity throughout this process." I nodded once, unable to trust my voice. Then the judge said the line that would later be replayed in my memory like a strike of thunder. "And now we will move to final evaluations before I issue my ruling." Everyone braced themselves. The courtroom showdown wasn't over. It was only moving into its deadliest phase. The next 10 minutes would determine everything. The justice arc had finally reached its public exposure moment, and there was no turning back. The courtroom felt like it was holding its breath. Even the air seemed to stop moving as Judge Caroline Whitford placed both hands on the bench, straightened her spine, and looked slowly from me to Brianna to Ethan and finally to the gallery where Darlene sat clutching her purse with white knuckles. When a judge prepares to speak like that, anyone who has ever been in a courtroom knows what is coming is irreversible. Final, life-altering. She inhaled once quietly and said, "This court has heard enough." The entire room froze. Even the bailiff, a tall man with arms thicker than fence posts, subtly shifted his stance, as if preparing for whatever reaction might come. Judge Whitford continued, voice controlled, crisp, unwavering. "The petitioner, Staff Sergeant Madison Kane, has presented compelling evidence of physical abuse, emotional manipulation, boundary violations, and financial coercion. The respondent, Brianna Wolfe, has presented only excuses, deflection, and an alarming lack of accountability." Brianna's breath hitched. Ethan looked like he might pass out. The judge kept going. "In my 20 years on this bench, I have seen many family conflicts disguised as misunderstandings, many deliberate acts of violence disguised as accidents, many manipulative individuals hiding behind the words family loyalty." Her eyes landed directly on Brianna. "But Miss Wolfe, what happened in that kitchen was not an accident. It was an attack, a premeditated assault with boiling liquid." Brianna's face drained of color so fast she looked ghost-like. The judge turned her focus to Ethan. "And Mr. Wolfe, you failed in your duty as a husband. You watched your wife suffer burns and chose to do nothing. You attempted to gaslight her before and after the event. You supported the coercion that preceded the assault. That makes you complicit." Ethan lowered his head shoulders, collapsing under the weight of the truth he could no longer deny or spin. Judge Whitford shifted her attention to the clerk. "The court will now enter its ruling." The sound of paper shuffling echoed loudly in the silence. She lifted the document and began reading. "Effective immediately, the respondent, Brianna Wolfe, is placed under a full restraining order. She is prohibited from contacting Staff Sergeant Kane directly or indirectly. She is prohibited from entering her residence, workplace, or military installation. Violation will result in immediate arrest." Brianna gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "No, please." "Your Honor, please." The judge didn't even glance her way. Continuing, "Mr. Ethan Wolfe is ordered to pay all medical expenses incurred by Staff Sergeant Kane as a result of the June 12th assault. Additionally, he will pay compensatory damages for emotional distress and the financial losses associated with her medical recovery period." Ethan's jaw fell open. "Your Honor, that's not fair." "I tried." The judge cut him off sharply. "You did not try. You watched. Sit down." He shut his mouth and lowered himself back into the chair as if someone had yanked his spine down. The judge kept reading. "Furthermore, this court prohibits Mrs. Darlene Wolfe from using, borrowing, leveraging, or benefiting from any VA loan, VA entitlement, or military housing allowance belonging to Staff Sergeant Kane." A loud, choked gasp erupted from the gallery. Darlene stood up so fast her chair scraped across the floor. "That's my daughter's benefit. That's family help. You can't take that from us." The bailiff moved instantly. "Ma'am, sit down." Darlene pointed a trembling finger at me. "She can't do this, Your Honor. She owes us. We took her in like family. The judge slammed her gavel once. "Ma'am, if you interrupt these proceedings again, you will be removed from the courtroom. Sit down." Darlene's knees buckled as she lowered herself shakily back into her seat, eyes burning with disbelief and fury. The judge tapped the end of her pen against the document once, then set it aside. She leaned forward. "And now, for the record, I will address the underlying issue that has been presented to this court. The real reason we are here today." Her voice deepened, carrying a chilling weight. This wasn't about a misunderstanding. This wasn't a family conflict. This wasn't stress or burnout or miscommunication. She paused, letting the silence sharpen like a blade. This wasn't family help. This was financial coercion and violence. The words struck the courtroom like a bolt of lightning. A woman in the gallery whispered, "That's it. That's the truth." Someone else murmured, "Lord, have mercy." The judge continued, voice like steel. "Coercion is not loyalty. Manipulation is not love. And throwing boiling liquid on a family member is not discipline. It is assault. It is abuse. It is a crime." Brianna burst into full sobbing now, not the gentle stage crying she had practiced earlier. This was panicked, choking, ragged hysteria. "Your Honor, please," she cried, standing without permission. "I didn't mean to hurt her. She's making it bigger than it was. Please. I can apologize. I will go to counseling. I will do anything. Please don't ruin my life." The judge's voice cracked like a whip. "Sit down, Miss Wolfe." Brianna didn't. She stumbled toward the judge's bench like someone begging for mercy at an altar. The bailiff moved instantly, grabbing her by the arm and guiding her firmly back. She twisted in his grip, crying harder. "Please, she's lying. She always thought she was better than us. She didn't need any help. She didn't need family. She just wants to punish me." The judge lifted one finger. "Enough." Brianna collapsed into her chair, sobbing uncontrollably. The judge turned to me again. "Staff Sergeant Kane, please stand." I rose slowly, feeling every eye in the room on me. The judge's expression softened for the first time. "You have shown restraint, integrity, and extraordinary courage. You documented the abuse. You sought help appropriately. You followed legal channels. You honored both your military duty and your duty to yourself." She nodded firmly. "Justice is on your side today." My throat tightened, but I stayed steady. She addressed the clerk again. "This ruling is final, entered into the record as of 11:42 a.m. The sound of her gavel striking wood echoed like the closing of a massive door. A door that separated my old life from my new one. As soon as the judge stood to leave, the courtroom erupted. Not noisy, not chaotic, but emotionally loud. Ethan sat motionless, staring at the floor, pale and defeated, like a man who just realized the version of events he built his life on had crumbled. Brianna shook uncontrollably, whispering, "No," over and over, like denial alone could reverse the ruling. Darlene sat stone still, hands shaking, her purse clutched so tightly that the leather groaned. Hart leaned toward me, speaking low. "That's it, Sergeant. You won. You should be proud." I didn't feel triumph. I felt release. A weight I had carried for years lifted so suddenly my knees nearly buckled. The judge exited. The bailiff announced, "Court is adjourned," but no one moved. Not yet. Then I heard it. A wet, broken whisper. "Madison, please." I turned. Brianna was standing only a few feet away. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks, her entire body trembling like a collapsing structure. "Please don't leave like this. Please talk to me. Please tell the judge you don't want the restraining order." I shook my head once. "No!" Her face cracked. "Please. I'm your sister. You're not my sister. Not anymore." She sobbed harder. Ethan stood behind her, eyes red-rimmed. "Maddie, I'm sorry. I can fix this. Tell the judge it was all a misunderstanding. Please." I opened the courtroom door. I didn't look back. Some doors you don't close gently. Some doors you let slam shut. And this one did. The justice arc had reached its full strike. And for the first time in years, I stepped into the hallway with nothing left weighing on my shoulders except the truth. It was over, and what waited next was freedom. The hallway outside the courtroom felt strangely quiet, like the aftermath of a storm that had torn through everything but finally moved on. My legs felt unsteady, not from fear, but from the sudden absence of it. For the first time in years, there was no waiting for Brianna to knock on the door without warning, no waiting for Ethan to turn cold, No waiting for the next demand, the next guilt trip, the next emotional ambush disguised as family loyalty. The silence felt foreign, but it also felt like freedom. Hart touched my elbow lightly. "Sergeant, take a breath. You're safe now." I nodded, though the truth of those words would take weeks to truly settle into my bones. The protective order was official. The divorce proceedings were moving forward. The VA loan exploitation was blocked permanently. The medical damages were being processed. Justice had been served in a courtroom filled with every person who doubted me, underestimated me, or tried to break me. But justice is not healing. Justice is the moment the bleeding stops. Healing is what comes after. And mine began the next morning. I walked into the behavioral health clinic on Fort Campbell wearing my uniform and the quiet scars of the past years still burning beneath it. A sergeant at the front desk greeted me warmly and handed me intake paperwork. "Staff Sergeant Kane." "First time here," I nodded. "For counseling?" "Yes." She smiled gently. "You're doing the right thing. I wasn't sure yet, but I hoped so." When my therapist, Dr. Elaine Porter, called my name, I followed her into a small office with soft lighting and chairs that didn't feel like government furniture. She sat across from me, notepad in hand. "What brings you in today?" "Sergeant." I had rehearsed answers, but when I opened my mouth, nothing rehearsed came out. Instead, I said, "I'm tired." She nodded like she had expected that. "Tell me about the exhaustion." Slowly the words came, not in dramatic waves, but in steady, controlled pieces. The years of financial pressure, the guilt manipulated into my ribs like a permanent bruise, the loneliness of being the only soldier in a house that treated responsibility like currency, the burns, the silence afterward, the moment I realized I had been calling abuse normal for so long I didn't recognize myself anymore. Dr. Porter listened with the quiet focus of someone trained to see what lies beneath the sentences. When I finished, she leaned back. "Staff Sergeant, this wasn't just an incident. This was long-term psychological erosion. You lived under coercion, subtle manipulation, and intermittent cruelty. Those conditions create trauma even before the violence begins. You did not overreact. You survived." Her words cracked something inside me that I had kept armored for years. But instead of tears, I felt a strange warmth spreading through my chest, the beginnings of self-recognition, the beginnings of healing. Therapy became my anchor, once a week for 3 months, then twice a month as the tension eased. Some sessions were heavy, reliving the attack, examining the years of self-doubt, dismantling every lie the Wolf family had tried to carve into my identity. Some sessions were empowering, rebuilding boundaries, learning to occupy space again without apology, rediscovering the version of myself that existed before manipulation diluted her. And some sessions were quiet, sitting in the stillness that had once terrified me, but now felt like home. During that time, the Army continued moving forward around me the way it always does. Soldiers rotate, missions evolve, units shift. Life doesn't pause even when yours almost did. 2 months after the ruling, I received orders to report to the battalion headquarters. My stomach tightened as I walked into the building, wondering if something was wrong. Captain Mercer stood inside his office door reading a file. When he looked up, he gave me the same assessing gaze he used before a major briefing. "At ease, Kane. Come in." I stepped in and stood ready. He held the file loosely at his side. "How's therapy going, Sergeant Good, sir?" "Hard sometimes, but good." He nodded approvingly. "That's exactly how it's supposed to be." He motioned for me to sit, and I did. He studied me for a long moment like he was comparing the soldier in front of him to the one he had seen months earlier. Then he said quietly, "You look lighter, stronger even." I blinked, surprised by the observation. "Thank you, sir." He handed me the file. "Open it." Inside was a promotion memorandum. "Effective immediately. Staff Sergeant Madison Kane was recommended and approved for promotion to Sergeant First Class E7. I stared at the document, stunned. "Sir, He held up a hand, stopping the protest he knew was coming. "Kane, you've been E6 longer than any soldier in this battalion should be. You run circles around everyone. Your record is flawless. You led through personal hell without ever compromising your duty, your professionalism, or your integrity." He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the desk. "And you survived something most soldiers don't talk about, much less report. You didn't break. You didn't retaliate illegally. You didn't self-destruct. You carried yourself with more discipline than any soldier I've supervised in 15 years." My throat tightened unexpectedly. He continued, "And more importantly, you didn't let their darkness make you dark. You stayed a leader, a protector, a soldier." He paused, then delivered a line that would stay with me forever. "Strength isn't what keeps you from falling. Strength is what makes you stand back up when everyone expected you to stay down." "Congratulations, Sergeant First Class." I exhaled shakily, accepting the file. "Thank you, sir." He nodded once. "You earned it." Later that week, I packed my belongings and left base housing for good. No more kitchen memories burned into the walls. No more rooms filled with echoes of arguments. No more front door that Brianna walked through like she owned it. I moved into a small rental house on the outskirts of Clarksville, Tennessee, a quiet place with creaking hardwood floors and tall windows overlooking a line of maple trees. No chaos, no shouting, no demands, just sunlight and silence and space. The first night in that house, I sat on the floor, surrounded by moving boxes, and listened to the quiet. Real quiet. Not the suffocating silence of being ignored. Not the tense silence before another argument. A clean silence. A healing silence. My phone buzzed. A text from Captain Mercer. One simple line. "Proud of you, SFC Kane," followed by another. "The hardest battles are the ones fought off duty. Remember that." I stared at the screen for a long moment before setting the phone down and leaning back against the wall. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a soldier surviving a war. I felt like a woman rebuilding a life. Therapy continued. I settled into my new rank. I rebuilt friendships I'd neglected. I cooked meals without fear of interruption. I slept through the night without flinching at every sound. Healing wasn't linear. Some days, the memory of the attack came in flashes. Some days I doubted myself. Some days I wondered how I let it all go on for so long. But healing isn't the absence of wounds. It's the moment they stop defining you. Months passed. Seasons changed. And slowly the version of myself that the Wolf family had tried to bury began to stand up straighter, walk taller, speak louder, exist freely. One afternoon, as autumn settled over Clarksville, I took a walk near the river path, breathing in the cool air. I paused under a maple tree, watching leaves drift down, and thought about everything that had happened. The courtroom, the ruling, the therapy, the promotion, the peace. And I realized something quietly profound. Leaving them wasn't the end. It was the beginning. And for the first time in years, I wasn't scared of the next chapter. I was ready for it. The storm was behind me. Healing had taken root. And my life, finally my own, was waiting. 3 months after the ruling, life had finally quieted into something steady and breathable. The leaves in Clarksville had shifted into deep oranges and muted reds. My morning routines had returned to something normal: coffee on the porch, before PT therapy sessions, reviewing watch bills for my company, writing evaluations for soldiers who depended on my guidance instead of draining my sanity. For the first time in years, I moved through my days without bracing for someone else's crisis to land on my doorstep. The protective order had held firm. Not one message, not one call, not one attempt at contact from any member of the Wolf family. Until one cold Thursday morning in late October, when my phone buzzed with a message from Hart. "Need you to swing by the county judiciary building. Nothing wrong, just procedural. At your convenience." His texts were always short but clear. I assumed it was something simple, a signature, a follow-up, a document update. I never imagined what waited. The sun was barely up when I parked outside the Nashville Metropolitan Justice Center. The wind was sharp, the kind that stings your cheeks and makes your eyes water a bit. I tightened my jacket and headed toward the front entrance, only half awake mind already on the afternoon training schedule. Then I heard my name, barely, like a cracked whisper carried by the wind. "Madison." I froze. The voice was unmistakable even after months of silence, thin, desperate, and trembling. I turned my head slowly. Brianna Wolfe was standing near the stone pillar by the entrance, her hair messy, her clothes wrinkled, and her eyes swollen like she hadn't slept in days. She took one shaky step forward. "Madison, please." My body went cold, not in fear, but in disbelief at the audacity. She wasn't supposed to be anywhere near me. She wasn't even allowed within 500 feet legally. My hand instinctively moved toward my phone, ready to call security. "Stop right there, Brianna!" She lifted both hands as if surrendering, tears spilling instantly down her face. I know I'm not supposed to be here, but please just listen to me." I shook my head once, already firm, already done. "Brianna, this is a violation of the restraining order." "Leave now." Her voice cracked into a sob. "Please, Madison, please don't call anyone. I have no one left." I didn't respond. I wouldn't move toward her, but I wouldn't run either. I had nothing to fear anymore. She took a trembling breath, then dropped suddenly to her knees on the concrete. The sound echoed sharply against the stone walls. People walking past turned their heads. Some slowed. Some stopped. She bowed forward, almost collapsing onto her hands as she cried, "Please, Madison, please don't let them keep that order. I need it gone. I can't survive like this." Her voice was shaking violently, her breath fogging in the cold morning air. I stared at her stunned, not because I felt sympathy, but because the sheer entitlement was so familiar, so perfectly predictable. Months of court rulings, therapy, boundaries, discipline, and she still believed one thing: I could be guilted back into saving her. Brianna kept crying harder. "You don't understand. No one will rent to me. No one will co-sign anything. Mom's house is going into foreclosure and I can't get a loan because of the charges." She looked up at me, mascara streaked and eyes wide with panic. "Madison, please, you're the only one who can fix this." Something inside me snapped into perfect clarity. She didn't come to apologize. She didn't come to admit wrongdoing. She didn't come to atone. She came because I was useful. Again. The same pattern, the same demand, the same manipulation wrapped in desperation instead of anger. She sobbed louder, the cold air swirling around us. "Please, please, Madison, I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy. I'll get help. I'll stay away. Just tell the judge to lift the order." I swallowed once, but my voice was steady. "No." Brianna froze like the word had slammed into her chest. "What?" She looked up slowly, eyes wide with disbelief, as if she genuinely couldn't process a version of reality where the word no applied to her. I repeated it more clearly. "No." Her mouth fell open. "Madison, please. I'm begging you. You're my sister." The word sister hit me like a spark, but not in the way she intended. It didn't melt anything. It didn't soften the edges. It reminded me exactly why this needed to end permanently. I stepped back, keeping the legal distance even though she was still kneeling. "We are not sisters, Brianna. Not now. Not ever again." Her face twisted in shock and desperation. "Please don't do this. Please. I can't pay the fines. I can't help Mom. I can't get a place to live. Everybody thinks I'm a monster." My voice remained calm, the way only a soldier who has finally reclaimed her identity can sound. "That's because of your actions, Brianna, not mine. You threw boiling liquid on me. You manipulated me for years. You endangered your own child. These are consequences, not punishments." She broke, then collapsing forward, hands flat against the concrete forehead, almost touching the ground in front of me. A public display of desperation, not remorse. "Madison, please don't walk away. Don't leave me like this." I breathed in slowly. The cold air steadied me clearer than any emotion. Then I said the words she never thought she would hear, words I should have said years ago, words that finally closed every open wound she had carved into my life. "I don't owe you anything." Her sobbing stopped for a split second, shock cutting through her voice. "Madison, please, don't do this to me." I shook my head. "You did this to yourself." She lunged slightly forward again, but the bailiff stationed at the front entrance noticed and moved toward us. "Ma'am, you need to step back right now." Brianna flinched away, wiping her face frantically. I'm not hurting her. I'm not doing anything. I just need to talk to her. The bailiff's expression hardened. You are violating a restraining order. You need to leave before you're detained. Brianna's head whipped back toward me, her voice cracking again. Madison, please tell him it's okay. Please. I met her eyes one final time. No. She stared at me stunned, as if the word burned. The bailiff took her lightly by the arm, guiding her away from the entrance. She didn't fight. She just kept staring at me over her shoulder as if her world was collapsing and she still couldn't understand why. As she was led away, she whispered one last plea carried thin and broken by the wind. Please. I looked away. I walked into the building without turning back, and for the first time in my life, the sound of her crying didn't pierce me. It didn't shake me. It didn't make me second-guess myself. It made me exhale. Inside, Hart was standing by the elevators reviewing paperwork. He glanced up and immediately noticed the tension in my posture. You okay, Sergeant? I nodded. She was outside, violating the order. He sighed the kind of sigh lawyers reserve for situations they expected sooner or later. I figured this might happen eventually. Entitlement rarely dies quietly. You want to report the violation? I thought about it. Then I shook my head. Not today. She got the message. Hart studied me for a moment, then nodded. Good. You're in control now, not her. As we walked toward the elevator, I felt something settle into place inside my chest. A boundary firm. Final. Unbreakable. No more guilt. No more obligation. No more saving people who hurt me. I had learned the hardest lesson of all. Some people don't want forgiveness. They want access. And once you deny them that access, you finally get your freedom. If you've ever dealt with someone like that, someone who only comes back when they need saving, you'll understand exactly why I walked away. And if you have your own story, your own moment, you finally said no, leave it in the comments. Someone out there needs to hear it. I drove slowly through the winding back roads of Clarksville as the afternoon sun dipped low enough to cast long shadows across the fields. It was the same road I had driven hundreds of times before, but the weight that had once sat on my shoulders was finally gone. My life didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like open ground, clean, quiet, mine. As I approached the familiar iron gates of Fort Campbell for the last time in this story, I slowed the car and watched the MP at the checkpoint wave me forward. The guard recognized me and nodded the way soldiers do to one another with respect earned through service rather than words. Inside the gate, the landscape looked the same, soldiers jogging in formation. The distant sound of cadence caused the steady hum of a bass always in motion, but it felt different to me now. Lighter, safer, like a place that helped shape me instead of a place I clung to for survival. I pulled to the side of the road, turning off the engine, letting the silence settle. Everything that happened, everything Brianna tried to take from me, everything Ethan let happen, every ounce of manipulation and coercion had led me here to this moment of clarity. I leaned forward, resting my hands on the steering wheel, feeling the soft vibration of the cooling engine, and said the truth out loud for the first time with no fear and no shame. Violence doesn't have a gender. I had spent years hearing people say real abuse only happens one way. That women can't be violent, that family fights are private, that spouses stand by their partners no matter what. But those ideas kept me silent longer than they should have. Abuse comes from entitlement, not from gender. And what Brianna did was abuse. What Ethan allowed was abuse. And naming it didn't make me weak. It made me free. I exhaled slowly, letting that truth settle deeper into my bones. Then I whispered the next lesson I learned too late but would never forget again. Family doesn't excuse exploitation. Family is supposed to protect you, support you, hold you accountable, not drain you, bleed, you manipulate you, or harm you. Brianna tried to use family as a weapon. Ethan tried to use marriage as a shield. Darlene tried to use obligation as leverage. None of it was love. None of it was loyalty. It was entitlement dressed up as kinship. And walking away wasn't betrayal. Staying would have been. I sat back, finally able to breathe normally fully. The wind rustled across the open field beyond the road, carrying the faint smell of earth and autumn leaves. Healing didn't come in one moment. It came slowly like strength returning to muscles long ignored. Every court hearing, every therapy session, every time I said no when they expected me to fold, every time I remembered I wasn't the villain in their story. Justice isn't revenge. Justice is balance. Justice is truth. Justice is the moment the person who was harmed finally stands taller than the harm. And justice matters. I whispered it softly to myself because the words felt like a vow. Justice matters. What happened to me will not happen again. What they tried to take from me, I took back piece by piece. My dignity, my voice, my future, my peace. I started the engine again, letting the soft rumble steady me. Then I drove slowly through the base one more time, passing the hangars, the training fields, the endless row of barracks that had seen thousands of soldiers come and go through generations. When I reached the main gate, the guard waved politely and the barrier lifted. I drove forward, feeling the symbolic weight of those gates opening not to let me out, but to let me move on. Clarksville stretched out before me, bathed in soft golden light. A place that held my hardest memories, and now held my freedom too. As the road unfurled ahead, I knew something with absolute certainty. This chapter was closed. Not forgotten, but closed. And the future waiting in front of me was wide open. If you're watching this, if you've ever felt trapped by people who claimed to love you while hurting you, remember this part. You can walk away. You can rebuild. You can rise again. And justice, no matter how long it takes, is worth fighting for. Before you go, tell me one thing so I know I'm not alone out here. Where are you watching from? And if you've ever witnessed a family situation like this, share your story in the comments. Someone else might need to see it tonight.